Hi, I'm Andy Shalal. I'm the owner of Busboys and Poets. We are so happy to have Rock Newman and the Rock Newman Show join our tribe here. We are a tribe. This is a place where racial and cultural connections are consciously uplifted, a place where art, culture, and politics intentionally collide. This is a space to take a deliberate pause and feed your mind, body, and soul. We believe by creating such a space, we can actually change our community, change DC, and change the world for the better. And now, the Rock Newman Show.
Good evening, folks, and thank you so much for joining us, those looking in all around the world, and those here for a special edition live of the Rock Newman Show, broadcasting from the Langston Hughes Room. Every single time I say that, I just love it. We're broadcasting live from the Langston Hughes Room at Busboys and Poets, 14th and V Street, Northwest Washington, D.C. This is a special broadcast, and we are going to be doing a bit of a wrap-up, covering and having a post-mortem, if you will, on the 50th anniversary of the historic March on Washington. The march today is being applauded in many circles for its wide-ranging reach, its cultural, racial, ethnic diversity, and some of the comments being made as the celebration took place down on the National Mall. The speech from the Lincoln Memorial, where 50 years ago today, well, actually it was on the 28th, but commemorated. One of the marches was today. There's going to be another one on Wednesday when President Obama will be addressing the throngs. But today was a historic day, a absolutely beautiful day. The heavens shined on certainly on Washington, D.C. today with one of the most spectacularly beautiful days you could ever see. And we have a great lineup this evening. We're going from 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock, and if it gets funky up in here, we'll go even longer than that. We have today, our first guest is Dr. Janetta B. Cole. She is currently the director of the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art. She has been president of Bennett College and Spelman down in Atlanta. There were so many plaudits, so much written about her great stint at Spelman. We're going to have Mark Morial, president and CEO of the National Urban League, will be joining us. William P. Jones, the author of The March on Washington, will join us. Dr. Joyce Ladner, who was former president of Howard University, who was at the 1963 March, and there again today, she will be joining us. Dr. Cornel West, philosopher, academic, activist, author, public intellectual, and prominent member of the Democratic Socialists of America. He has been a lightning rod, but here at Busboys and Poets and on the Rock Newman Show, we get opinions from all angles. We will be talking to Dr. Cornel West a little later in the show. We also will have Harry Johnson Esquire. He's president and CEO of the Washington, D.C. Martin Luther King Jr. National Memorial Project Foundation. He has raised under his guidance and leadership, they have raised over $100 million. And we'll be talking to him about the memorial. We have a great show for you today. But without any further ado, let me welcome to the Rock Newman Show, the Langston Hughes Room and Busboys and Poet, Dr. Janetta B. Cole. Thank you so much for being. We love you.
Love you back.
Dr. Cole, what I often do on the program here is your reputation greatly precedes you, and it is a great reputation. So now you are the director of the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art, and so that identifies you in a certain way as to what you're doing now. What I like for the live audience here at Busboys and Poets and my audience that might be watching around the world is to find out who the person is that is doing this now. Mm-hmm. So let's go back.
I'm ready.
All right. I'd like to have you to sort of go back as far as you might be able to remember. Tell me the first memory that you have as you trace back your lifespan. What's the first memory that you have?
Well, I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, in those incredibly horrific days of legalized racial discrimination.
I feel it. I feel it when you say it.
Some of my early memories are about what it was like to be a young black girl. But some of those memories are also about what it was like to grow up in an incredibly loving Southern black family. And so what I'm saying, my brother Rock, is my early memories, it's a duality.
Yeah.
It's about that day when I was, I don't know, maybe 3, 4, but my mama took me with her to the beauty parlor. And like many little girls and boys would do, I started wandering. And I crossed a line. I crossed a line from a black neighborhood into a white neighborhood. I remember to this day a little white boy chasing me, screaming with the N-word. But you see, I also remember running back into that beauty parlor, into my mama's arms. And I remember both the comfort and the charge. I don't think I'm making this up, that my mama explained that it was wrong and that she and the rest of my family were working to make that right.
Make things better.
To make it better. I also remember, I remember playing in our yard. I remember a little boy, a little African-American boy, saying, as kids would often do then, and still do, nya, 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 nya. He said, nya, 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 nya. You can't climb that tree because you're a girl.
Yeah.
That Rock Newman?
Yes, ma'am.
You know I climbed that tree.
What you do? Now, you know what? You said a little African-American boy, and you're talking long before the March on Washington.
Yes.
So obviously that's more than 50 years.
Oh, yeah.
So in Jacksonville, Florida at that time, were you colored? Were you Negro? What were we at that time?
At that time, we demanded to be called Negroes.
So colored was
Because
kicked out the
remember,
door.
we had come from a history of enslavement where we had been called everything but a child of God. And language does matter. You know, language signals thought.
Yeah.
It signals emotion.
Yeah.
But here we are today, proudly calling ourselves African Americans. Now, there's a problem with that.
Okay.
I'm going to explain it.
Please do.
Those of us, W.B. Du Bois would say, of the darker hue, call ourselves African Americans. But my brother, everybody is African.
Can I get a high five on that?
Everybody. If you are a human being,
Yes.
if you go back far enough,
Hello.
there's only one place you could have descended from. It is Africa.
This ain't
We
just
are
a
all
live
Africans.
streaming and radio show. We're about to go to church up in here. All right. You know what?
What?
Sitting in that chair, last week there were 2 chairs here. There was a student intern who was 20 years old, and there was a PhD professor from Howard University, and the professor was a paleontologist, and the student was studying paleontology, and they both were part of a find of a 15-million-year-old whale. And we got both of them talking about the original man and woman.
Man.
And the little young white fellow who was sitting here, when he said unquestionably the origins of the human being were first came out of Africa.
Clearly.
I said, shake my hand, you my African brother.
That's it. That's it. Well, imagine how wonderful it is for me to work at a place called the National Museum of African Art.
And we're going to get there.
And we'll get there. But African is something that we've all got to share. And I guess I've just got to say it. You know, we spend so much time talking about what divides us, how different we are, the various categories into which we human beings keep sending ourselves. But there's only one cradle of humanity. There is only one place where women and men began.
You know what? We are going to come back to your early years. But on that subject, I've got to share this. Not too long ago, I caught a cab at LaGuardia Airport in New York, going into Midtown, 42nd Street and 6th Avenue. And on my way, I engaged in a discussion with the cab driver. And eventually, it came out that he was from Egypt. So I said, hello, my African brother. And he damn near turned the cab over. I am not Africa. I'm from Egypt. Now, why?
Well, let me share this. When I was a young student of anthropology, the field in which I eventually got my PhD, I had an intuitive sense that something was wrong when in classes that I was taking, books that I was reading, I kept hearing about this line that divided the north of Africa from sub-Saharan Africa. One more effort to rob black folk of their humanity, one more effort to create divisions that should never be. That's why in our museum we present the art, the culture of the entire continent, north, south, east, west, and central.
Yeah. You know, when I said, but Egypt is on the continent of Africa. So how does that dissolve in any way? How do you say you are not an African? And he started speaking a language that I didn't even understand, whatever it was he was saying, trying to defend his position that he wasn't African but Egyptian. It wouldn't have mattered anyhow because it was fool talk.
But my brother, that is the great power of bigotry.
And
when those who are the subject of it start speaking the bad talk.
Yeah.
And that's why, you know, we really have to challenge how we define ourselves, what language we use about ourselves, because language matters. Let me share with you this. We did an exhibition not long ago by a fantastic Moroccan feminist by the name of Lala Essedi. I can't tell you how many people said, Dr. Cole, why are you doing an exhibition of art from Morocco?
Wow.
I thought this was an African art museum.
Hello.
Last time I looked, Morocco was on the African continent.
But Casablanca is something romantic and beautiful, and so therefore it can't be in Africa.
Now you finally made the point I've been edging up on. The implication is, because Egypt is so fine, developed with the pyramids, with the pharaohs, it cannot belong to Africa. How sad.
How very sad. And you know, people use as that cliche oftentimes, his story. But it really is his story, and that story really ain't very true.
And for somebody who was privileged to be the president of Spelman College and Bennett College for Women, I am pleased when we not only refer to his story, history, but her story as well.
Well, that is too bad. That is too awesome. Let me tell you, before we go to break, let's go back.
All right.
Obviously, you have very strong family support. Who outside of your immediate family, no matter if it was a national, international figure, teacher, or whatever, had the most early influence on a genetic code?
Well, the connection was between my great-grandfather, who was Abraham Lincoln Lewis, and his very close colleague and friend, Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune.
Ooh.
These two figures in the state of Florida were incredibly close. They sat on each other's boards. He sat on the board at Bethune-Cookman College. She sat on the board of Edward Waters College, where my great-grandfather was very, very attached.
Yeah.
I remember as a young girl, knee-high to a duck, going to Daytona Beach, Florida, and literally sitting on the lap of that great educator.
Wow.
Now, a lot of folk have suggested that Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune must have whispered something into my ear because I was so influenced by her. But I'm going to tell you the truth. As a young girl, you know what really, really impressed me?
Tell us.
The hats she wore. And of course, as I grew into my own adolescence and into my young womanhood, I came to understand how much she had done.
Yeah.
That she had literally baked sweet potato pies to raise money to build an educational institution. She went on, as we all know, to be one of the founders of what was then called the Negro Women's Club movement, furthered today by the National Council of Negro Women.
We got about 30 seconds before we go to break. Is that where Dorothy Height got those hats from that Dr. Dorothy Height used to wear?
There is no question. The baton was passed from Dr. Bethune to Dr. Dorothy Irene Height.
And what a soldier she was, and a champion for all people.
True.
We'll be right back in a few moments on The Rock Newman Show.
My baby drives a Pohanka.
The weekend is here, and no matter what the weather's like outside, you'll find the deals inside here in the beautiful showroom of the all-new Pohanka Hyundai in Capitol Heights during their giant Markdown Madness sale.
Smart shoppers know that every new Hyundai in Pohanka comes with Hyundai Assurance and America's best 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. But why don't you tell them about the Markdown sale, Joe?
I'll be happy to, Kim. Folks, shop around on the web, and you'll see lease payments on a new 2013 Elantra GLS at $179 a month. Today at Pohanka Hyundai, $99 a month. That's right, a $99 payment on a brand new Elantra. extra.
And $89 a month on a new 2013 Accent GLS Automatic. How do they do it, Joe?
It must be the volume, Kim. A brand new building, hundreds of new Hyundais, and Pohanka's low payment and easy credit programs are designed to get everybody driving. But you have to get here today. Rush to the giant Markdown Madness sale at exit 13 off the Capitol Beltway.
Pohanka Hyundai, king of the Beltway. All financing for a limited term on approved HMF credit.
My baby drives a Pohanka.
Hello to all my friends in the DMV. I am Rock Newman from the Rock Newman Show. I want to tell you about the MGM Grand National Harbor, the most exciting project to come to the District, Maryland, or Virginia in quite some time. You're going to have great fun. Come on down, support this project with all you have. It is going to be wonderful for the area. We're going to increase our tax base. We're going to get funding for the police department, for ambulance, for fire, for education. It is really a project that is going to benefit our area. Folks, we want to support in a very strong DMV kind of way this great project from the MGM Grand National Harbor.
And now, the Rock Newman Show.
Folks, we're back today, Saturday, August the 24th, the 50th anniversary of the historic March on Washington, D.C., and this place is starting to fill up. I would encourage you, come on down and join us here at Busboys and Poets. We are broadcasting live from the Langston Hughes Room. It is the place to be. In studio with me now, Dr. Janetta Cole, Director of the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art, former president of Bennett and Spelman. We're going to have Mark Morial, William P. Jones, the author of The March on Washington. Dr. Cornel West will be in the house. Harry Johnson, Esquire, President and CEO of the Washington, D.C. Martin Luther King Jr. National Memorial Project Foundation will be with us. But right now we have none other than Dr. Janetta McCole. And Dr. Cole, before we went to break, we talked a little bit about Dorothy Height and one of your great influences, Mary McLeod Bethune. Okay, so early on, you sat on her knee and on the knee of Abraham Lincoln Lewis, who was your
great-grandfather.
Who was your great-grandfather. Okay, so that was at an early age. Those of you may or may not know, if research serves me properly, you went to Fisk University at the age of 15.
That's true.
So, you know, in school, some kids stay back and some kids skip. Did you do a lot of skipping?
I'd love to tell this quickly. I had really pushy black parents who thought that nothing in the world could be more powerful than the church. The school.
For y'all, if y'all need that translated, the church.
The church.
That's the church where you say amen and hallelujah.
Right. The church, the school, and the bank. And Abraham Lincoln Lewis, my great-grandfather, said you got to put a lot into the 3 B's. The Bible, the school book, and the bank book. So his granddaughter, my mom, and the wonderful man she married, my father, they believed that education was the single most powerful means for the advancement, not just of an individual, but for a people. So it wasn't a question of would I do well in school? It was a question of I had to do well in school. So one day, I come home from school and I'm told that I'm to go downtown and take a test tomorrow. And if I pass the test, I would not graduate from high school. I would go directly to Fisk University. Now, this was an early entrance program. If you think I went early at 15, Maynard Jackson went to Morehouse at age 14. I didn't want to go to Fisk. But I was too stupid to know how to fix it. So I go downtown. All I had to do was fail the test.
Yeah.
No, I passed the test.
You didn't know how to fail.
I didn't know how to fail.
You wasn't raised up that way.
I wasn't raised to fail no test. And so off I went to Fisk.
Yeah.
It was an incredibly important experience in my life. Fisk University, with that amazing art collection. Fisk University with some of the greatest black intellectuals in the world. But that was the year when my father died. And I thought my world had ended.
That's when you were 15?
I was 15 years old.
Wow.
And I was John Thomas Betts Sr.'s baby girl.
Yeah.
And so there was an exchange program with Oberlin College, that great college that was the first to accept women, the first to accept African Americans. I went on the exchange because I could be near my sister, who was already there.
Yeah.
I never left Oberlin. And so I really feel I've been blessed to have the experience of the historically black university, Fisk, and one of the best small liberal arts colleges called Oberlin.
Can you describe going to Fisk? Can you kind of, again, travel back and illuminate for us what it felt like being in the midst of all of that history there?
And it was. It was to be in the midst of it all, and Fisk knew that an enormous amount of the experience had to be to connect students with those who had been there before. I'm talking about like a Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. There I was, going to a library where the murals had been done by great African-American artists. Who was the librarian? Arna Bonta. Who was the president? The great Charles S. Johnson. And so my early years in college taught me that there was a long history and her story of black intellectuals, of black artists, and of black activists. And so when we went downtown to do our version of sitting in at the lunch counter, it wasn't something that that generation of Fisk students had thought about. It was a continuation of social activism.
You went to Fisk at 15. When did you graduate?
I graduated from Oberlin, in 1957, an incredible year.
Yes.
I want to share this with you, my brother.
Yeah.
I was a debater. That was my main extracurricular activity. 1957, I remember, it was a tough competition. It was Oberlin versus another college. And the question we were debating was the liberation of African nations. So I prepared. I'm the sweep-up debater. I am to give this rhetorical, sweeping argument that will seal the case. Oh, but I had so little vision, because I remember standing and very rhetorically and dramatically saying, this is the year of the independence of Ghana, the first African country below the Sahara to gain its independence. And oh, how sad I am that in my lifetime I will not see the end of apartheid and the freedom of the black people of South Africa. How could I have had so little faith?
Yes, yes, yes.
And now we look at a continent, 54 nations. Yes, a continent with challenges.
Certainly.
But a continent clearly on the move.
So you finished the 1957. You know, when I hear that word, when I hear the year, 1957, I just automatically think of Little Rock, Arkansas. And all of the turmoil and all of the pain, just the struggle. 1957 just makes me think of Little Rock, Arkansas.
It makes me think of Little Rock no less. And I remember a number of years ago going to Arkansas and going to that high school and reliving in my own mind what it must have been like. Of the Little Rock Nine, I happen to know Ernie Green. But it's not hard for me to imagine what it must have been like to be young, gifted, and black, as Lorraine Hansberry would put it.
And Nina Simone would sell it.
And
sing
Nina
it.
Simone would sing it. And to have to go to school accompanied by armed men. What bravery the Nine had.
Yes.
What extraordinary courage they had. And when we think today about the state of education among black and brown students, we dare not fix it so that the Little Rock Nine, so that Charlene Hunter Galt at the University of Georgia, so that our brother James at the University of Mississippi did not take those horrible experiences in vain.
Yes, yes, yes. Folks, if you got any children that's sitting around, you need to bring them and let them watch The Rock Newman Show at rocknewmanshow.com. In studio with me right now in the Langston Hughes Room, we're broadcasting live from Busboys and Poet, Dr. Janetta B. Cole. So, okay, so you finished college from Oberlin in 1957. What happened next?
Well, not only did I go to Oberlin, but I discovered my passion. I went there thinking I was going to be a baby doctor. Mm-hmm. Since I was little, somebody would say, you know how old folk and not so old folks say, now, little girl or little boy, what are you going to be when you grow up? Uh-huh. I had it down pat. I'm going to be a baby doctor. Uh-huh. When I got to Oberlin, walked into a particular classroom, watched a long, lanky white professor talk about anthropology. I could hardly spell the word. That was it. And the reason that it was such an instant love affair was that he was describing a field that could explain where I had come from, where all of humanity had come from, and a field that would help me see not only the differences among people, but the commonalities. So I became an anthropologist. Now, in those days, I didn't have a lot of sheroes. That is, reflections of myself. But there was one. And if you walk out of Busboys and Poets across the street to Eatonville,
hello,
you are in a place.
Who that? Who that?
You know her name.
What her name is?
Her name be Zora Neale Hurston.
That's right.
And that explains why my favorite place, I'm sorry, Andy, my favorite place to eat is not Busboys and Poets. It's across the street.
And for those of you around the world who might not connect those dots, Busboys and Poets is right across the street from Eatonville, and the visionary and the artist and that beautiful man that owns both of them is named Andy Shalal. We thank him for all that he has done in Washington, D.C., and all that he'll continue to do.
We do. And I just want to remind folk, both here in Washington, D.C. and around the world, why Andy put Eatonville right across the street from Busboys and Poets. We all know, sitting as we do in the Langston Hughes Room, that he was a busboy and a poet.
That's right.
He was a prominent figure in the Harlem Renaissance,
yes,
as was Zora Neale Hurston.
Yes.
Well, unfortunately, they had a little riff, and both went to glory before they ever patched it up.
Before the healing.
So Andy figured, these are his words, if he put Eatonville right across from Busboys and Poets, the spirits of Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston just might make up.
You about to make me call on Arsenio Hall up in here. Woo, 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 woo. For sure, for sure. What glory is Hurston being your shero? What did that mean to you?
It meant that I could be an anthropologist. You know, I believe that white folk, if they really work at it, can come to understand some of the sensibilities of black folk. That those of us who are not Hispanics, if we work at it, we can come to understand some of the sensibilities of Hispanic sisters and brothers.
Yes.
But there's a power in having a teacher, a model, a figure who is a reflection of you.
Yes, yes, yes.
And so when I looked at Zora Neale Hurston, who was, among other things, an anthropologist, I said, well, if she can be an anthropologist, then so can I. I want to make the point again, though, about human empathy.
Yeah.
One of my sheroes, Audre Lorde, perhaps the most acknowledged and famous black lesbian of a given era, she said, now listen, if black teachers have been teaching Shakespeare all of these years, then why can't white teachers learn to teach Jibby Baldwin and Zora Neale Hurston? So yes, through human empathy, we can understand each other's conditions. But there's something so powerful in having that teacher, that physics teacher, be a black woman in front of a black student.
For an example is always much more powerful than just a word. And we'll have many words when we come back. We're going to talk about the National Museum of African Art and its director, Janetta Cole, when we come back on The Rock Newman Show.
This is Leprechaun Tim Pohanka from Pohanka Nissan and Pohanka Hyundai. It's hard to be down on your luck when you're Virginia's first choice for new Nissan and Hyundais, but I need to sell 60 cars this week. Right now, I'll pay you big bucks for your good luck. Bring down any good luck charm you've got, and based on the sale price of the car you choose, I'll give you up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car this week. Today, your lucky penny is worth plenty, up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car you want. Stop moping and hoping you'll get approved. With my For the People credit approval process, the banks are looking to get lucky and lend to you, even if you've been turned down before. Bring me any good luck charm and I'll give you up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car today. Hurry, once I get rid of 60 cars, the luck runs out. All offers require bank approval, so call us at 1-800-POHANKA, visit Pohanka Nissan and Pohanka Hyundai on Route 1 in Fredericksburg, or better yet, log on to timpohankaforthepeople.com. And when we make a deal, I promise it'll be your lucky day. I'm Tim Pohanka, and I'm a leprechaun for the people.
And now, The Rock Newman Show.
Welcome back, folks. Saturday, August the 24th, 2013. We're broadcasting live from Busboys and Poets. We're on the stage of the Langston Hughes Room, and Dr. Janetta B. Cole is with me. Dr. Cole, you were at the march today. This is the 50th anniversary of the historic Martin Luther King's historic March on Washington. You were there today. Give us a sense of how it felt being amongst the throngs.
It was so important for me to be there because I hadn't been there 50 years ago.
Right.
I arrived very early. I was there probably about 7:45 when the ecumenical service took place.
Mm-hmm.
And we know the role of religious figures in the African American community and in all communities. Well, I'm here to tell you the preachers showed up and showed out.
Did the preachers preach?
They preached. And from the very beginning, it was clear that women folk would be present this time. We moved from the ecumenical portion into the speechifying, a word I learned from one of my sons who said, Mom, you just speechify. But the speechifying was incredibly diverse and powerful. I think Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I think that my incredibly precious and powerful sister friend, Coretta Scott King, up in glory was saying yes. Because while the focus importantly in 1963 was around our struggle, yours and mine as black folk, today that struggle included
It broadened, yes.
all of the good Lord's people. I mean, all the people she made, by whatever color.
Y'all heard her say, all the people she made, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
All
Don't
the
miss
people,
that.
all the people she made. And so I saw no disconnect between continuing to talk about how much we have yet to do for the full liberation of African American communities, while we also included folk who haven't got what they need yet as well.
The tagline of the Rock Newman Show is "We Are One."
We were one today.
That's special. Tell me, so you're there today. What part of the country or the world were you in 50 years ago when Martin Luther King
A
spoke?
little town you may never have heard of, Pullman, Washington, as a young professor.
So you were all the way across the country.
Oh, across the country, but a young professor who had the privilege of helping to start one of the first black studies programs in our country. It was a period now, 63, when black students were saying, we will change how we are educated. And I, as a young professor, was marching with them. I, as a young professor, was going to jail with them. I, as a young professor, on the western part of our country, we too were doing a march on Washington.
Wow, wow, wow. You are the director of the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art. And somebody might ask the question, why do we need a museum of African art? And Janetta Cole might say,
well, because we need to remain in touch with our souls. Let me tell a quick story.
Please do.
One of my dear friends was at that time serving as the director of a children's museum. And she had a potential donor. And she's doing the best she can to really get this donor positioned to give to this museum that's full of children's art. Finally, he said, look, lady. Now, you always want to be careful when a man says, look, lady. He said, look, lady, you're here talking about art, these pictures and stuff. I care about children and their welfare, about their health care, about their education, about their housing. why should I put my money into pictures?
Yeah.
She said, sir, I care about the same children that you care about. And all of our children need good health care and housing and education. But they also need joy. And that's one of the things that art can bring. Joy.
Joy from Africa.
Joy from Africa. Our museum presents the visual arts from the north, the south, the east, the west, Central Africa. It presents the diverse and the dynamic visual arts of that continent. And while there is much joy in looking at this array of creativity, I also, as the director, hold on to my role as an educator. Because I know that when our visitors are in that museum, they cannot or they should not hold on to stereotypes about Africa. You're looking at this incredible 15th century work of art.
Yes.
An ivory bracelet carved by a Yoruba artist from a single piece of ivory. When you look at that, how dare you continue to think about Tarzan?
Yeah.
You're in the presence of creativity.
Of true greatness.
Of course.
Of real greatness, not that celluloid stuff. Right. Just recently, you, let me see if I can tie this together. Just recently, you had Jill Scott.
Yes, we did.
At the museum. Now, I don't do a whole lot of research, but I do a little bit. And a little birdie told me that you are a jazz lover.
Ooh, I love black improvisational music, sometimes called jazz, like the devil loves sin. And we know the devil loves sin. Oh, it is. In fact, I'm just going to make a confession.
Please.
I would love to grow up and do exactly what you do, but with a twist. If I could have my own radio program and be the one spinning black improvisational music, ooh, I'd be one happy.
I'd sign up to be your first sponsor.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I do. I do.
And where did you get that? Where did you fall in love? How did you fall in love?
Well, first of all, my mama, graduate of Wilberforce, one of our historically black universities, was into music. I mean, my mama was in the church. She played the organ. She played the piano. She directed all of the choirs. Yeah. And so I grew up from being a very young girl, really into music. But it was more church music and classical music. But then along came my little brother, John Thomas Betts Jr., who is to this day a professional jazz musician. He lives in Paris. He's lived there for the last 22 years.
What's he play?
Drums. He is a student of Max Roach. He has played over the course of his life with the greats like Dollar Brand, like Archie Shepp, like many greats. And so my brother, though 9 years younger than I, just stirred my interest in that music. You know, I really see jazz as a metaphor for life. It's about the coming together of people on diverse instruments. But if they are not in tune with each other, we do not have the music that we want. It is also a metaphor for life in the sense that it reminds us that what we're listening to now has come from some place. We've got to stop thinking that life begins now. Jazz comes out of Africa.
You know, folks, I'm going to ask a question, and I want you all to really listen to the answer. I have no idea what it's going to be. Your brother plays the drum.
Mm-hmm.
You're the director of the Smithsonian National Museum of Art.
Mm-hmm.
Would you care to elaborate on what the drum and the drum beat has meant to Africa?
The drum is the beat, but it is also the force. It is the power. We know that in traditional African cultures, the drum often was the means of communicating. And many of us experience that when we return to our original place or we are in the presence of a talking drum. The drum sets the beat. And when we were enslaved and brought into this country, instruments were taken away from us. We were not to speak our original languages. We were stripped of so much. But you can't keep a people from doing the beat.
Yeah.
James Baldwin once said, we were taken out of Africa, but you can't take Africa out of us.
Yes, yes, yes.
And so the music in our museum is important.
Mm-hmm.
The dance is important. Theater is important. And it all speaks in some ways around the visual arts. Now, not only is my brother a jazz drummer, my sister, who is now in glory, was a double major in voice and piano at Oberlin.
All right.
And went on to sing lead roles in German state opera.
Wow, wow.
So I'm left with just loving jazz. I can't carry a tune in a bucket, but I can love black improvisational music.
I feel you. So I didn't make it. I very much wanted to make it to the event where you had Jill Scott. You know, and I found it just kind of interesting about, I heard Jill Scott was coming to the Museum of African Art. And I remember the role that she played in the story on
the first Lady Detective Agency.
That's right, on HBO, and it was HBO. And I thought she did such a fantastic job with that. Tell us about that occasion. What happened? What had you to bring her there?
Well, first of all, I have to say how much I appreciate one of my colleagues. His name is Eddie Burke. And he helps to create what we call the Director's Discussion Series. The first was a conversation I had with one of the great minds of the world, Kwame Anthony Appiah, described by Forbes magazine as one of the smartest, most important thinkers in the world. He's at Princeton.
Yeah.
The second was with Marcus Samuelsson, that internationally known chef, born in Ethiopia, raised in Sweden, now with the Red Rooster as his restaurant in Harlem.
Yeah.
The third was with Dr. Maya Angelou.
I'll give you a little piece of information.
What?
The MGM Grand National Harbor is one of our sponsors. And they're working real hard on getting he and the Red Rooster right here on the shores of the Potomac River.
Wouldn't that be
That would be
something?
sweet, yes.
So the third was with Dr. Maya Angelou. 1,400 folk filled the National Museum of American Indians Auditorium. And the last, and there will be more,
Yes.
was with Jill Scott. Jill Scott is a whole woman. She, without standing and making a big speech, smashed every stereotype about black women. First of all, she's an incredible intellect.
Yes.
She reads.
Yes.
Now, I admit some of her favorite books are science fiction. She is a poet.
Yeah.
She describes herself as a poet who happens to sing. She is an actress.
Yeah.
She is an incredible human being. And so because of all of that, plus her role as the first Lady Detective Agency principal character in Botswana, the connection to Africa was so clear.
Yeah.
We were really pleased to have the ambassador from Botswana to the United States, Sister Ambassador Soretsi, stand up at the end of the program and make us all feel the power, the joy, the creativity of Botswana and the rest of Africa.
We have communities, part of what was talked about today, and it should be talked, I think, about it every day. And I wish every parent was like your parent in stressing the absolute importance and just quintessential necessity of education. So many parents today are falling short with leading our young ones on an educational path. Please, in a few moments we have left, talk about your advice, because you're highly qualified to give advice to those younger ones amongst us in our communities about how they should attempt to prepare their children.
I think we can say without exaggerating that teaching is a sacred task, that education is a powerful and necessary tool for the advancement of a people and an individual. I want to quote a slave master. The year was 1832. He owned a lot of slaves in Mississippi. These were his words: slavery and knowledge are incompatible. You cannot be enslaved in the true sense of enslavement if you are educated. That's why Frederick Douglass tricked a boy into teaching him how to read. That is why black men and women risked their lives during the period of enslavement to learn to read, because it was against the law for a slave to know how to read. Here we are today with no more formal enslavement, no more formal racial discrimination. We've got to value education no less today than it was valued then. And I must say, if we don't take our children's education into our hands, our hearts, and make it right, I don't know what's going to happen to us.
The slide will continue.
I don't know what will happen to us.
Yes. Dr. Janetta Cole, thank you so very much for being on the Rock Newman Show. You gotta promise me it won't be your last time.
Oh, I was waiting for you to say that.
Yo, we want you to come back.
I would love to.
Thank you very much.
And I just want to thank you for all of the righteous work that you've been doing and that you continue to do. Thank you, my brother.
Thank you so much. We'll be back in just a few moments on the Rock Newman Show.
My baby drives a pro handcuff.
The weekend is here, and no matter what the weather's like outside, you'll find the deals inside here in the beautiful showroom of the all-new Pohanka Hyundai in Capitol Heights during their giant Markdown Madness sale.
Smart shoppers know that every new Hyundai in Pohanka comes with Hyundai Assurance and America's best 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. But why don't you tell them about the markdown sale, Joe?
I'll be happy to, Kim. Folks, shop around on the web, and you'll see lease payments on a new 2013 Elantra GLS at $179 a month. Today at Pohanka Hyundai, none $99 a month. That's right, a $99 payment on a brand new Elantra.
And $89 a month on a new 2013 Accent GLS Automatic. How do they do it, Joe?
It must be the volume, Kim. A brand new building, hundreds of new Hyundais, and Pohanka's low payment and easy credit programs are designed to get everybody driving. But you have to get here today. Rush to the giant Markdown Madness sale at exit 13 off the Capitol Beltway.
Pohanka Hyundai, king of the Beltway. All financing for a limited term on approved HMF credit.
My baby drives a Pohanka.
Hello, everybody. I'm Rock Newman from The Rock Newman Show. And I am absolutely flattered to have as one of my fine advertisers the DMV's greatest corporate citizen. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about the Pohanka Automotive Group. If you have any automotive needs whatsoever, if you want to sell your car, buy a car, trade in your car, have your car serviced, whatever you need, see my good friends at the Pohanka Automotive Group. You will be well taken care of, I promise. I'm Rock Newman. I might be there. Come on down and see our good friends at Pohanka Automotive Group.
And now, The Rock Newman Show.
Folks, welcome back to the Rock Newman Show. Today, August the 24th, we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of the historic March on Washington led by Martin Luther King in 1963. My guest in this hour is Mark Morial, President and CEO of the National Urban League. Mark played a very, very significant role in pulling all that was today together. From every estimation, all of the initial reports, just sort of every measure, every standard used is that today was a great day on the mall. Mark Morial, welcome to the Rock Newman Show.
Rock, I'm so glad to be with you again.
Again.
And it's good to be here at Busboys and Poets and with a great audience. Today was an impactful day. It was a powerful day. The weather cooperated with us.
Oh, did it ever. Just a beautiful
And the
day.
enthusiasm and sense of spirit and purpose in the crowd really, really made it a very special day. The National Urban League that I'm proud to lead was a part of today's march and a part of the march in 1963.
Yes.
And 1963 was a coming together of civil rights, labor, and religious organizations here in Washington, D.C., for that march at that time under a very different set of circumstances in our nation. And we came today not just to commemorate, but we came to commemorate, to reflect, to remember, to understand 1963. But we also came to commit to a continuation, a continuation when it comes to the challenges that the country faces in 2013. And that's so important that your listening audience and certainly those in the live audience we all focus that what we were working to do today is to really, really jumpstart a new civil rights movement in the nation against voter suppression, against income disparities, against the idea of poor schools, against the assault of the filibuster and the stand your ground legislation coming from parts of this nation that want to turn the hands of time back. I think we succeeded today. We succeeded because the crowd was powerful. Lots of young people in the crowd. Lots of women speaking something that wasn't a big part of 1963. The expansion of the movement to other communities. So it was a great day. So how many of you all participated? And give yourselves a big hand.
Yes.
Your audience participated. We love you. We respect you. What a powerful, peaceful, and purposeful audience we had out there on the mall marching for purpose.
Mark, in 1963, certainly it was the truly explosion of the civil rights struggle,
Yes.
the visible, active part of the civil rights struggle. And primarily, not only, but primarily the focus there was on the interest of the black population that was so incredibly disenfranchised. It seems as if in this march today that the coalition really did broaden.
And it needs to broaden, and we must broaden it, because even in 1963, while the focus was on the dismantling of segregation through the passage of a Civil Rights Act, the enfranchisement of those who had been enslaved 100 years earlier, while those were the important names of 1963, in 2013 we have a broad coalition. It includes Latinos. It includes progressives from the white community. It includes the LGBT community and women activists and Asians and Native Americans, because that's what the future of America is going to be. It's going to be broad. It's going to be everyone. But underneath it are the principles of freedom, the principles of justice, equality, full participation in American life. And I said in my speech today, I got an opportunity to share, which was a privilege, that some people want to pass stand your ground legislation. We want to stand our ground against injustice, stand our ground against joblessness. We've got to reaffirm that. One thing I certainly want to share with you is that on Friday, the National Urban League teamed up with the Memorial Foundation, headed by Harry Johnson, and we held a one-day Redeem the Dream Summit. As a part of that summit, we not only had speakers, we not only had a Future Forward Leaders celebration, we also had the release of what we call the 21st Century Agenda for Jobs and Freedom. We convened about 70 leaders, 60 to 70 leaders, myself, Reverend Sharpton, Benjamin Jellis, Melanie Campbell, colleagues in the movement, came together beginning last December to put this agenda together for public policy. So we are determined for this not to be like a late-night movie. We just came for one time, and then it's over. We came because we want this to be a new beginning.
Mark, can you share that agenda? Because that's part, a lot of folks want to say, okay, it really felt good down on the mall today. There were a lot of great speeches. What's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen next week?
Here's the public policy agenda that we crafted. It focuses on 5 priority areas. One is jobs, the economy, and income inequality, which is widening in this nation, which means that people's paychecks do not go far enough to help them afford the necessities of life, that there are not enough jobs, and certainly many who even have jobs do not earn fair wages. The economy and jobs, a big focus. We've got recommendations. One is to raise the minimum wage and index it to inflation. Then we've got education and schools. And that's a broad area, but an important area, because education and training leads to good jobs. Our children have a right to quality education. They have a right to systems that spend the same on the education of a kid, whether they're here in Washington or in the suburbs, whether they're in downtown Chicago or on the lakefront in Chicago, for example. And then we've got to focus on democracy and voting rights, because the Supreme Court, the voter suppression laws, all of the efforts that have been made over the last several years to suppress the vote, we must resist. And this suppression effort, in its sinister methodologies, even has an ally in a 5-vote majority of the Supreme Court, which knocked out a key provision of the 1960s in the Voting Rights Act. Then criminal justice reform. We are a nation where we have 5% of the world's population, but we incarcerate 25% of those in jail here in the United States. We've got to fix the broken criminal justice system. It's not working. It's costing us too much. It is giving a life sentence to even people who commit very minor offenses, because when they come out of jail, that conviction keeps them from getting a job, getting a loan, moving on, and getting back on their feet. And then we have health disparity. So it's a 5-part agenda. It is statements of principles. We've got 90 recommendations. People say, why do you have so many recommendations? Because it's a serious thing. It's not a talking points document. It's not a propaganda manifesto. It is a serious policy document, and it's at NUL.org. NUL.org. Read it. We've got 60 signatories in terms of organizations. We want that 60 to turn to 600, 6,000, indeed 6 million supporters. So there'll be mobilization. Reverend Sharpton talked today about going to North Carolina, about going to Texas, about further mobilizations around the country as we seek to highlight those states like Texas where the voter ID law, the Supreme Court decision wasn't dry. The ink was not dry on the decision, and the Attorney General of Texas said, I'm going to implement the voter ID law immediately. North Carolina, just within the last 30 days, passed one of the most draconian set of anti-democracy pieces of legislation in modern American history. It harkens back not to the 1950s, Rock, it harkens back to the early 1900s because it's tantamount, Dr. Cole, to a new form of literacy tests, a new form of poll tax and grandfather clauses.
Rachel Maddow on MSNBC, she did an incredible piece. I think it was Thursday night. She was actually at Elizabeth City, I think it was.
North Carolina.
Yeah. Where there was a gentleman who was on campus who wanted to run for public office there, and the legislature, the way this thing has come down now, it is basically denying him the opportunity to run by saying that him living on campus doesn't make him a full-time resident. I mean, and it really, she highlighted in a very clear fashion the absolute rollback. So obviously,
and the absurdity and the idea that we're going to say to a college student, you cannot participate in the democratic system. Look, I remember I was young. It was earlier than I can vote when we fought a battle and we amended the Constitution so that 18-year-olders could vote. The minimum voting age was 21. It moved down to 18, and the thinking was that those that went to war to defend the country had a right to vote in our elections. That was the argument. It was bought. It was passed. It was ratified by the states. Now we have this, and let me tell you why, perhaps more than any other thing, Rock. You know, here we are engaged in foreign efforts, whether it's in Iraq to, quote, promote democracy, whether it's in Afghanistan to promote democracy and stand up democratic institutions, yet some of the same proponents of that in this country, want to roll back voting rights and democracy for the American people. We cannot let it happen. We must stand up to it. We must stand our ground on it. It is a bedrock principle of the United States of America for people to have the right to participate in the election of their public officials. That's what voting is. That's what democracy is.
Mark, let me have you to weigh in on this. There are those in the black community that suggest that at the bottom rung, that there needs to be such intense focus put on specifically the issues of African Americans that organizations like the Urban League and, for example, and it's sort of, if you could sort of tie this together for me, the same thing is said about to Barack Obama, that you have this broad coalition and everybody's rights are being addressed, But it seems like while the broad coalition of rights, everyone's rights are being addressed, African Americans are falling more and more behind.
I think, for example, that I don't think, and I can only speak for the National Urban League and our advocacy, from the very beginning, we've been loud, we've been vocal, we've been constructive in recommending that economic policy, jobs policy, be targeted on those parts of the community that have the highest unemployment.
Mm-hmm.
And that means Black America.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean only Black America, because you have Appalachian counties.
Yeah.
You have Latino counties in places like the Central Valley in California and New York City and Los Angeles that have high unemployment also. We've been vocal. Now, here's what some voices seem to have forgotten. We had a very important conversation 2 years ago with President Obama about this in the Oval Office. Myself and Benjamin Jealous went in, asked the president for a new bill when it comes to jobs, asked him to include within it targeted specific provisions, summer jobs, assistance for public employees of local governments, a wide range of ideas. We handed him a set of recommendations in that meeting. 45 days later, he called a joint session of Congress. He introduced the American Jobs Act with a lot of fanfare, and it has been stuck on the Senate calendar due to filibuster since then. What I think is that it's a fair discussion as to whether we need to have targeted provisions, but we do have people who do comment, and they have a right to comment, but they're sitting in the gallery.
Yeah.
And they always don't have all the facts and all the dots. And I think that we renewed it in our public policy agenda that there have to be targeted provisions. Now, targeting does not mean simply targeting based only on race.
Yes.
It means targeting based on areas of the community that have high unemployment. It just so happens that many of those are going to be African American. They're going to be Latino in rural areas. They may be where rural whites and rural Native Americans live. So I think it's a fair debate, Rock, and I think that we do need more targeted efforts. But I also think that this president has seen the filibuster used more times in his time in office than the filibuster has been used in the times of all of the presidents since the filibuster was founded in the early 1900s up until then. That's a fact, and that needs to be stated too.
Okay. Mark Morial, National President and CEO of the National Urban League, former mayor of the Big Easy, New Orleans. We'll be back in just a moment on the Rock Newman Show from the Langston Hughes Room at Busboys and Poets.
My baby drives a bull handcuff.
The weekend is here, and no matter what the weather's like outside, you'll find the deals inside here in the beautiful showroom of the all-new Pohanka Hyundai in Capitol Heights during their giant Markdown Madness sale.
Smart shoppers know that every new Hyundai in Pohanka comes with Hyundai Assurance and America's best 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. But why don't you tell them about the markdown sale, Joe?
I'll be happy to, Kim. Folks, shop around on the web, and you'll see lease payments on a new 2013 Elantra GLS at $179 a month. Today at Pohanka Hyundai, $99 a month. That's right, a $99 payment on a brand new Elantra.
And $89 a month on a new 2013 Accent GLS Automatic. How do they do it, Joe?
It must be the volume, Kim. A brand new building, hundreds of new Hyundais, and Pohanka's low payment and easy credit programs are designed to get everybody driving. But you have to get here today. Rush to the giant markdown madness sale at exit 13 off the Capitol Beltway.
Pohanka Hyundai, king of the Beltway. All financing for a limited term on approved HMF credit.
My baby drives a Pohanka.
Hello to all my friends in the DMV. I am Rock Newman from the Rock Newman Show. I want to tell you about the MGM Grand National Harbor, the most exciting project to come to the District, Maryland, or Virginia in quite some time. You're going to have great fun. Come on down, support this project with all you have. It is going to be wonderful for the area. We're going to increase our tax base. We're going to get funding for the police department, for ambulance, for fire, for education. It is really a project that is going to benefit our area. Folks, we want to support in a very strong DMV kind of way this great project from the MGM Grand National Harbor.
And now, the Rock Newman Show.
Hi, folks. This is Rock Newman. Today's Saturday, August the 24th, 2013. We're doing a postmortem, a wrap-up, commentary about the 50th anniversary of the historic Martin Luther King March on Washington, D.C. In studio with me in the Langston Hughes room at Busboys and Poets, former mayor of New Orleans, the Big Easy, and president now and CEO of the National Urban League. You know, before we go back to some heady stuff, let me just say, let me bring up a name that I'm sure you're rather familiar with. It's he at one point worked for and I think headed up an organization that had just tremendous impact throughout the South on people voting. The Southern Organization of Unified Leadership Soul, guy by the name of Don Hubbard.
Oh, man.
Talk to me about Don Hubbard. Now, you all might not know who Don Hubbard is. I'm going to say this. He's a friend of mine. But
Don's a friend of mine and a mentor, and, you know, Don was one of those folks who came out of CORE,
yes,
the Congress of Racial Equality. He actually was part of the 1963 march on City Hall in New Orleans, because there were 30 to 40 local marches in the 2-month period after the March on Washington to support the messaging of the March on Washington. Don Hubbard was one of the organizers of that march, and then later created a political organization, the Southern Organization for Unified Leadership, called SOUL.
SOUL.
It was a political organization in New Orleans. It was respected and feared.
Yeah.
In the 1970s, Don Hubbard was a person whose door everyone who ran for office knocked on.
Yeah.
And I'm proud that when I began my political career in the early 90s, he took me under his wing. He shared with me so much wisdom, so much thought, so much foresight, and sort of counsel. I was young.
Yeah.
I was aggressive.
Sure.
I was sometimes impatient.
Yeah.
And Don counseled me in terms of how to work with some of the senior leaders in the community. But a great friend, and I got to tell a story about you, Newt.
Oh, wait, just before you tell it about me, because I want to say something else about Don that I learned. First of all, Don, I think, finished the 8th grade and didn't do any more in school. He happens to be,
most brilliant men.
I refer to him as one of the smartest human beings that I've ever met on the planet Earth. And, I learned something about him. When he went to Syracuse, New York, there was a car dealer in Syracuse or Buffalo, New York, that donated the station wagon that weren't the three civil rights were Schwerner,
Goodman and Cheney.
Goodman and Cheney. Don actually went, picked that car. Now, he's a young guy then, I guess maybe in his
20s.
Early 20s.
Early 20s.
He went up, drove that car back, and a couple of days after he drove it back, it is when those three brothers, perished there in the swamp.
I didn't know that story, but Don was a frontline civil rights leader who became a serious political activist and a business person.
Yes.
He now owns a great bed and breakfast
Called the Hubbard Mansion on
Hubbard
St. Charles
Mansion.
Avenue, 3535.
St. Charles, you know it.
That's right.
And he is, transitioned to be really a truly elder statesman, certainly in the community. So I'm going to tell a little story about Rock because Rock was working in the boxing game.
Do I need to duck?
Yeah, no. And I'm a big-time boxing fan, just big-time boxing fan. The Muhammad Ali fights in the 1970s and followed Larry Holmes, and Rock was working with Riddick. And one day he called my office. And the guy ran in and said, Newt Rockney is on the phone. Newt Rockney is on the phone. Newt Rockney. I said, Newt Rockney has been dead for 50 years. He said, but he's Rock something. He's the Rock. I said, you mean Rock Newman. Rock Newman. But, we've had such a great friendship, over the years, and I've admired and respected your leadership. And the contributions you made here in Washington, D.C. For many, many years and many generations ago. I think what it tells us is that, like Don Hubbard, you, so many others, have contributed so much in so many avenues in life to the politics of this community, to the entrepreneurship of this community, to the business and social fabric of the community. And, I admire that. And I indeed respect that. And I think today on the Mall was also this idea of also helping to pass the torch, helping to engender and stimulate and energize a new generation. The Urban League, we had about 4,000 people who marched with us from the Grand Hyatt to the site of the Lincoln Memorial. We had approximately 40 kids, all under the age of 12. Leading our march all the way in. We said, and I said, put the children up front.
Hello.
If we're going to respect the children and elevate the children and talk about the interests of the children, let's put them up front. Let them have an experience of a lifetime to say they participated in this historic event. And so it was really, really
Mark,
special.
as we talk some personal things here, I got to tell you something, man. One of my heroes, one of my serious heroes was a guy, they referred to him as Dutch Moriel, your daddy. I'd like to ask you, man, his kind of firebrand politics, take no prisoner, tough as nails, first African-American mayor of that most southern city, New Orleans, where, a whole lot of racism had been practiced for a long time, but he stood up, man, with the kind of courage and the kind of fire that was so very inspirational.
He was, my father was unique. He was one of a kind, but like so many, he became an elected official after serving as a civil rights leader.
Yeah.
He was a civil rights lawyer. He was president of the New Orleans branch of the NAACP in the 1960s. He was a colleague of Medgar Evers. And like so many in that time, they saw the next stage politics. So in 1967, he broke the color line. He became the first black legislator in Louisiana history. In 1977, he again broke the color line and became the first African-American mayor of my hometown, New Orleans. And I was proud to be able to serve as mayor, indeed, years after he had passed on. But I think that kind of take no prisoners, tell it like it is, tough as nails, principled leadership, sometimes is missing in the discourse today. And, he made a difference. He had an impact. He certainly was a great inspiration to me because one of the things he did for me and my brother and my sisters is he took us to political events, and he took us to civil rights activities, and we were exposed when we were young. Now, you know, when we were young, we didn't want to go.
Of course.
But we were going because there was no babysitter nearby. And we just had to roll. And over time, you realize many, many years later what an experience it was, what you learned, and how many people you saw. And I can remember the iconic civil rights leaders of New Orleans. If you ask me about them by name, I could tell you how they dressed. I can tell you who smoked a cigar, who smoked a pipe, who cussed a lot, who wore raggedy clothes, and who dressed in the king's finest.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when you're a kid, you see and you absorb so many things. And so I say that for everyone who's listening and everyone who's here in the building. Look, we've got to not only talk to our kids and our young people, we have to expose them.
And talking about talking to young kids, Mark, part of what I like to try to do as best I can is sort of draw out examples. And there are a lot of young folks here in the audience. And Lord knows there are young folks that are watching around the world here now. I'd like to have you to sort of dig deep. I imagine, not that I've heard any particular stories, but Dutch Boreal became mayor in what, 1970?
1977.
In 1977. So that first black mayor during that time, he was in the legislature 10 years earlier. I can only imagine, man, that he must have lived under some threats.
Well, one thing he used to talk about, he said when they were in high school, they would steal the screen on the bus. You know, the buses in the South and in New Orleans, there was a little sign that said, for colored patrons only. Yeah. And African Americans sat behind the sign on the bus. And the bus sign in New Orleans was actually a sign that fit into two holes on the seat on the bus. And he said they'd get on the bus every day.
He and his boys?
And steal the sign. They just take it, and they took them home. And they got a big old collection of them every day. Get on the bus, steal the sign, just as they were about to get out through the back door, just took the sign, took the sign, took the sign, took the sign. Mm-hmm. And it was their way of resisting that indignity.
They're making a statement.
And they were making a statement. So when he became mayor, he had the sign on his desk in City Hall.
Yeah.
He put it on the
Let
on
us
his desk.
not forget.
First day he was there, and it was there until the day he left. And it said, I never forget, it said, for colored patrons only.
Wow. You know what? Janetta Cole, Dr. Janetta Cole, the legendary.
Who's right here in the audience.
The legendary Dr. Janetta Cole. She just talked about her affinity for jazz. I can't have the former mayor of New Orleans here and talking about affinity and a fan of a family called the Neville brothers and Aaron Neville.
Aaron Neville, Art Neville, Cecil Neville, the Neville brothers, and they spawned the Meters. And, you know, the thing about great New Orleans music, and it's important for people to realize, you know, when jazz music began, there were those who cussed it and castigated it because they said it was gut bucket music. It was out of the mainstream music, that jazz musicians promoted race mixing. That was the language of the 1920s and 30s and 40s. Great jazz musicians like King Oliver and Kid Ory and Louis Armstrong, who were of New Orleans, left New Orleans. They went to Chicago. They went to New York. They went to Los Angeles because they could not play in the clubs of New Orleans at that time to an audience of white patrons. Jazz was also a politically transformative form of music. Mm-hmm. It was one of the first art forms where you had, Benny Goodman was legendary for this, that had integrated bands. The first art form where you had white patrons and black patrons listening to jazz music. So jazz is original, it's unique, it's a great part of New Orleans, and I'm always proud that my friend and contemporary that we grew up with, Wynton Marsalis, has continued this tradition. He's got jazz at Lincoln Center, but he's also given jazz, I think, a new, if you will, lease on the future by helping to develop and spawn great jazz musicians. And now jazz is considered to be mainstream American music.
Yes.
It's in the same genre with many as classical music. And thanks for raising it.
Yes.
Thanks for helping give me an opportunity to talk about it. When I was in office, we renamed the New Orleans International Airport after Louis Armstrong. So that airport is called the Louis Armstrong International Airport. It's the only airport in the world named after a jazz musician. And we did it as a tribute to Satchmo's 100th birthday, which took place in the year 2000 because he was born in 1900.
So, Mark, we have 2 minutes left here. Man, we could talk all night for sure. Where do we go from here? Where does the National Urban League, what's the National Urban League's probably greatest focus and where do you go from here?
It's on jobs. It's on Jobs Rebuild America. We've just launched a brand new initiative called Jobs Rebuild America. We've got new job training programs in 30 cities across the nation. These job training programs include new programs to train those who've been incarcerated in the juvenile system and in the adult system, get job training and find jobs. We've got brand new initiatives to try to grow small businesses and brand new initiatives when it comes to after-school work. A big thrust, we've always been the economic civil rights organization, focusing on job creation, focusing on connecting people with work. That's our big focus. But the other big focus is going to be this agenda and working collaboratively to build this new coalition and this new movement for civil rights. So follow me on Twitter, @Mark Morial. Follow the National Urban League, @NatUrbanLeague. Like us on Facebook. Join this conversation. Join this community. We're going to put some people to work. We're going to continue to advocate, and we are inspired by the day. And, Rock, I love you. Appreciate everything you do, and congratulations on the show.
Well, I want you to love me enough to come back one more time.
I'll be back
2 or
with
3
brother,
more times.
Anytime you call.
Okay,
Thank
next
you.
we're going to have up William P. Jones, the author of The March on Washington. Actually, he'll be coming up in another segment. And you come back in a few moments on the Rock Newman Show here at Busboys and Poets in the Langston Hughes Room.
This is Leprechaun Tim Pohanka from Pohanka Nissan and Pohanka Hyundai. It's hard to be down on your luck when you're Virginia's first choice for new Nissan and Hyundais, but I need to sell 60 cars this week. Right now, I'll pay you big bucks for your good luck. Bring down any good luck charm you've gotten based on the sale price of the car you choose. I'll give you up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car this week. Today, your lucky penny is worth plenty, up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car you want. Stop moping and hoping you'll get approved. With my For the People credit approval process, the banks are looking to get lucky and lend to you, even if you've been turned down before. Bring me any good luck charm and I'll give you up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car today. Hurry, once I get rid of 60 cars, the luck runs out. All offers require bank approval, so call us at 1-800-POHANKA, visit Pohanka Nissan and Pohanka Hyundai on Route 1 in Fredericksburg, or better yet, log on to TimPohankaForThePeople.com. And when we make a deal, I promise it'll be your lucky day. I'm Tim Pohanka, and I'm a leprechaun for the people.
baby drives a handcuff.
The weekend is here, and no matter what the weather's like outside, you'll find the deals inside here in the beautiful showroom of the all-new Pohanka Hyundai in Capitol Heights during their giant Markdown Madness sale.
Smart shoppers know that every new Hyundai in Pohanka comes with Hyundai Assurance and America's best 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. But why don't you tell them about the markdown sale, Joe?
I'll be happy to, Kim. Folks, shop around on the web, and you'll see lease payments on a new 2013 Elantra GLS at $179 a month. Today at Pohanka Hyundai, $99 a month. That's right, a $99 payment on a brand new Elantra.
And $89 a month on a new 2013 Accent GLS Automatic. How do they do it, Joe?
It must be the volume, Kim. A brand new building, hundreds of new Hyundais, and Pohanka's low payment and easy credit programs are designed to get everybody driving. But you have to get here today. Rush to the giant Markdown Madness sale at exit 13 off the Capitol Beltway.
Pohanka Hyundai, king of the Beltway. All financing for a limited term on approved HMF credit.
My baby drives a handcuff.
And now, the Rock Newman Show.
Welcome back, folks, to the Rock Newman Show. We have just a great evening coming up in the segments to follow here. We have Dr. Joyce Ladner, a former president of Howard University, who was at the march in 1963 and was around today. She is going to be joining us with her just wealth of wisdom and observations about 50 years ago and today. Also joining us is going to be Dr. Cornel West, and also we're going to have Reverend Jesse Jackson. So we've got a loaded next couple of hours coming up here. Call all your friends and tell them, you can see a whole lot of things happen on the Rock Newman Show at rocknewmanshow.com. And we still have some room here. Come on down and have a great meal and pick up on the conversation at Busboys and Poets. We're at 14th and V Street, Northwest Washington, D.C., broadcasting live from the Langston Hughes Room. And in studio at the table with me now is Reverend Lennox Abrigo. He is the president of the National Action Network D.C. chapter. And, in order to put something together like what happened on the mall today, there needs to be a lot of planning, a lot of organizing, a lot of coordination. And the D.C. chapter, being that they're here in D.C. and the march was here in D.C., was tagged with the responsibility of helping to make all of this happen. The planning, the logistics, the permitting, the sound, the stage, and all the rest. I know a little bit about putting events together. And to put an event together like today is a mammoth task. So, Reverend Abrigo, thank you so much for joining the Rock Newman Show. Tell us, when did the planning start?
I think it started about March or April of this year. Reverend Sharpton took on the responsibility and included all the major civil rights leaders.
Yes.
I was in the office. We have two offices in D.C. Reverend Sharpton has the bureau office, headed by Janae Ingram.
Yes.
And she was the lead person on the planning. And that office is on 18th Street. And Janae deals with legislation.
Yes.
So she handles Reverend Sharpton's relationship with Congress, everybody on Capitol Hill, with the White House, and with the Supreme Court. So she deals more with legislation and policy. The second office here in D.C. is the D.C. chapter.
Yeah.
And we handle grassroots mobilization and organization at the grassroots level. So that under Janae's leadership, because she has a direct, constant communication with Reverend Sharpton, so she got instructions from him and Martin King III. Then Reverend Sharpton called in all of the civil rights leaders, and they met at his office 3 or 4 times, and some unions as well, union presidents. And they started the initial planning. Reverend Sharpton gave the vision, and then they came up with the name of the march, and then they passed that information on to Reverend Sharpton's executive director, who's Tamika Mallory. That happened. Mallory is stationed in New York. She's at the House of Justice. And then they passed that information down to Janae, then to us. But since Janae doesn't have an army like we have, chapter members, we were responsible. So every Thursday, every Tuesday, since the instructions came down, pastors have been meeting as a pastor leadership team at Shiloh Baptist Church on 9th Street. And then on Thursday, all the volunteers came together at Metropolitan AME Church on M Street, that historic black church. So we have been responsible for the grassroots mobilization, getting all the volunteers, getting all the permits, as you mentioned. Janae did that. But Janae and I had experience with planning the Trayvon Martin Vigil. That was the first event we planned together. We had gotten a permit for 200 people. The Trayvon Martin Vigil, the DC Trayvon Martin Vigil, Reverend Chapman called for 100. We had one in DC on the steps of the court and the DC courts. And even though our permit said 200, we thought 200 people would come. The park police told us we had over 3,000. So Janae and I have been mobilizing on the ground here, and we did this for this march. There was a lot of mobilization done out of town as well, because Reverend Sharpton's influence and his breadth and span across this nation, and we have chapters all over the country. They brought buses, and we had all the major leaders of the civil rights movement and unions bring in buses and so on. But the on-the-ground planning, the map on the ground was done by us here in D.C.
Yeah, and let me ask, because this is fascinating stuff. How many volunteers did you end up having on the ground, that the D.C. chapter sort of managed?
About 300. Yes.
Right.
We were asking for more because we needed about 1,000 volunteers for the crowd we had. But we don't like, as civil rights leaders, to give the media any expectation of numbers. Because if you tell them you're gonna have 1,000 people and you only get 300, the media will report that as a failure. So we stayed away from giving numbers. So we said about 100,000. So we needed for 100,000 about 300 to 400 volunteers, marshals, medics, and all the other cleanup and everything else. So we had 300 that we managed, and it was an awesome job.
Okay, so back March or so, this initiative started, and you guys were meeting on Tuesday. It was sort of the management administration. On Thursdays, it was the volunteers. Let me ask you, what did you find your most difficult challenge? What gave you the greatest grief?
I think the civil rights movement is taking on a different form these days. It is taking on a more grassroots initiation because individuals are suffering the destruction of their human and civil rights. It's more an individual thing because unemployment is so high. And they understand, Americans understand that a part of the problem with unemployment is the government's, the Congress's failure to pass a bill for minimum wage, as well as to make sure that government expenditure, there's a government investment in the economy, in the U.S. economy, that would allow for employment to take place, that would stimulate the economy and move it forward. Take, for example, the government bailed out banks and major corporations. But the banks kept all that money that they made by banking exchanges. They sell money to each other overnight. And those profits they kept for themselves. And plus they did other investments. Those investments and the profits were not turned back into the economy to create employment. So people are beginning to understand, internet, social media, and social networking is informing people in ways that we didn't have 50 years ago. So people are getting information from all kinds of sources, and they're getting inside information. And so people understand at the grassroots level that there's a serious problem with the way their government sees them and the way the government is taking initiatives to help them. Healthcare, for example. I go to some rallies just to see what is happening in other states. And in some states where they're trying to debunk Obamacare and criticize it, the senators or the congressman, whoever it is in this rally ginning people up to condemn Obamacare. And this leader, of the rally, the congressman or the senator, has government health care.
Right.
And the people that he is ginning up to destroy health care for the public, they're saying, yes, great. So that kind of idiocy is becoming more and more visible. So people realize that, well, why can't we have health care from the government if our congressman has health care from the government?
Right.
Why is he voting to deny us health care and we're suffering? Then you look at the benefits, when they hear about the benefits of health care, that students now are able to stay on their parents' health care until 25, that the insurance company cannot cap your payment. And there's so many benefits that are coming on stream. So because of that, the civil rights movement is now, just like media, is now an individual initiation that one guy can blog or get 300,000 hits for something on the internet, and that becomes news, major news. Similarly, individuals are understanding that their rights are being violated, and they're getting that sense from sources outside of the mainstream media.
You know, part of really what I wanted to do, and I was happy to be, try to get you on the program, was, we see the big finished product.
Yes.
What people don't understand, again, is all the work and all the particulars that go into producing that product. So I really kind of want to narrow this down on something. For example, were you charged with, this is always a part of a big march and a big rally, were you charged with getting the potty johns?
Yes, sir.
Your organization?
Yes, sir.
How many potty johns did we have? Do you have any idea?
I have an assistant who handled that. I didn't see the spreadsheet, but we had a lot of them. And what we did was, because this operation is so large, we had to delegate and trust the people that we delegate. Sometimes they didn't always report back to us. They just said it was done, and we didn't get specifics. But we had lots of potty johns, and we had to get more because as the responses came. Reverend Sharpton went down to RFK Stadium and paid for 100 bus spaces. Initially, we were only thinking, 25 or 30.
Right.
And you had to reserve it before the event.
Sure.
So we had to do that, and so all of those things were happening on the ground, and things were moving so fast.
So as a function, as functionaries, obviously this took money.
Yes.
You can't do this without putting gas in the tank.
Yes.
Do you know primarily, first of all, I'm assuming that as a local chapter of the National Network, when you have funding needs, the national chapter funds you.
Yes.
For this particular march, are you at all familiar with where the major funding came from?
I have a guess. Because I have a suspicion, because I haven't looked at the final reports. But we had every Monday night, we had a conference call with Reverend Sharpton and preachers, pastors, because our board chair, Dr. Frank Richardson, is a pastor. So he pastors Grace Baptist Church in Mount Vernon. And so every Monday night we had pastors on the line, and we were asking for donations from those pastors. We were attempting to raise the budget was a little over $1 million, and it just kept going higher and higher.
Yeah.
Because, to put on a march like that in these days with the technological advances we have, good technology costs more than it did in 1963.
Right.
So the amount get behind, but the pastors responded in a major way. Now, we did have some corporate donors. We did have some stars, celebrities who gave. But I think the major, and I'm sure when the final numbers come out, the major donations came from churches.
So your suspicion is that this particular march was more funded by the people than it was major corporations funding.
Absolutely right. And there was a reason for that. Because Reverend Sharpton made all the speakers commit, Reverend Sharpton and Martin King III, made all the speakers commit to not promoting their agenda. So no speaker could promote his agenda. Every speaker was limited to comments and remarks based on human and civil rights, because we wanted to show the continuation of the unfinished dream from Dr. King.
Right.
So I can't give you a specific as to how many corporate sponsors, but I know it was a minority in the minority. The majority of funds came from clergy, because Reverend Sharpton made an appeal to the church and to the churches. We have a vice president on Reverend Sharpton's board, not a vice president. We have a member on the board of directors of National Action Network at the national level who is responsible for coordinating pastors.
Yeah, and so many times you've mentioned the word, the churches. And there's so very many people, and much too often young folks, who opine that the black church is nowhere near as relevant as it once was in the past. And your response?
That's not true. That would have to be a reflection of media bias. Here in D.C., Reverend Braxton, who is the pastor of the Metropolitan AME Church on M Street, he almost figuratively gave us the keys of the church and say, use my church whenever you want for whatever you want.
Right.
We didn't have any deacons or elders supervising us. So we had so many black churches here in America. Barbara Williams Skinner
yes.
is mobilizing the African American clergy and in her organization. We had tons of involvement from the black church. Mm-hmm. Now, I think there's a perception that the black church is irrelevant when it comes to politics.
Mm-hmm.
So that the black church we don't have a lot of black clergy who are standing up and making political statements or addressing political issues in the public.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, history denies the irrelevance of the black church.
Mm-hmm. Well, did you have any friction with the black church being so heavily involved? And this just wasn't a civil rights for African Americans, that you had the gay and lesbian community. Did you have any friction with that?
Yes, we did. The black church is split over the LGBT issue.
Yeah.
However, I was invited to several press conferences by the mayor of D.C., Vincent Gray, did a fantastic job in organizing a committee to host. Mm-hmm. It's called the Host Committee, mm-hmm. Led by Frank Smith. And that committee, I partnered with them mm-hmm. because National Action Network DC chapter is a DC institution.
Sure.
So we partnered with the mayor's committee. And whenever we had a press conference, I have a friend who is the clergy liaison for the Human Rights Campaign, which is the LGBT, one of the LGBT organizations in this community.
Yeah.
And I invited him to the press conferences
mm-hmm.
and give him a chance to speak.
And you don't think you'll go to hell for that?
Well, of course not.
Okay.
Because he's my friend.
Sure.
And and we're both pastors. He's a reverend as well.
Mm-hmm.
So what I said in introducing him to the press conference is, and this reflects my position, I said that I support all of his human and civil rights. I support his right to housing, mm-hmm. his right to jobs, employment without discrimination. I support his right to health care, his right to vote. So I support all the LGBT rights that are human and civil rights.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's some rights that the LGBT community want that I am not yet at the point where I can support those. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that I want them destroyed or I want them shot in the street or I want them abandoned.
Hey, please let's don't shoot them in the street.
Amen.
Let's don't shoot them at all.
Amen.
Okay, let's love them.
Amen. Okay. We have LGBT people in my church.
Yeah.
And I tell them, you're not coming to my church for me to change you. I don't want, it's coming to my church and being a member of my church is not based on a condition that you have to change. Mm-hmm. You don't have to change. You can make your decisions and live how you want to live. Mm-hmm. I am your pastor, mm-hmm. and I love you like I love every other member. Mm-hmm. Because you might be surprised at this, but we have some thieves in our church too.
No.
We got some liars.
Oh, anywhere near the pulpit?
Yes, sir. We got some adulterers in our church. So, and that might shock you, but
I never would imagine.
So I don't make that distinction right. between which preferences people have mm-hmm. and say, well, this one preference, people
right.
are going to hell.
Right.
In fact, I was a part of a group of clergy who were fighting against the gay marriage law in Maryland. Mm-hmm. And when I understood what was happening, mm-hmm. that it was a politically motivated move,
yeah.
I backed away from that group of clergy. They're still my friends, but I share with them that I am never going to make a public denial of the human rights of the existence of LGBT people.
A big, big march like what happened today doesn't happen unless people are on the ground getting it done.
Yes.
You headed up that effort, Dr. Lennox Abrigo. Thank you so much for joining the Rock Newman Show.
Yes.
We'll be coming back in the next hour with Dr. Joyce Ladner. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a few moments.
Hello to all my friends in the DMV. I am Rock Newman from the Rock Newman Show. I want to tell you about the MGM Grand National Harbor, the most exciting project to come to the District, Maryland, or Virginia in quite some time. You're going to have great fun. Come on down, support this project with all you have. It is going to be wonderful for the area. We're going to increase our tax base. We're going to get funding for the police department, for ambulance, for fire, for education. It is really a project that is going to benefit our area. Folks, we want to support in a very strong DMV kind of way this great project from the MGM Grand National Harbor.
My baby drives a pro handcuff.
The weekend is here, and no matter what the weather's like outside, you'll find the deals inside here in the beautiful showroom of the all-new Pohanka Hyundai in Capitol Heights during their giant Markdown Madness sale.
Smart shoppers know that every new Hyundai in Pohanka comes with Hyundai Assurance and America's best 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. But why don't you tell them about the markdown sale, Joe?
I'll be happy to, Kim. Folks, shop around on the web, and you'll see lease payments on a new 2013 Elantra GLS at $179 a month. Today at Pohanka Hyundai, $99 a month. That's right, a $99 payment on a brand new Elantra.
And $89 a month on a new 2013 Accent GLS Automatic. How do they do it, Joe?
It must be the volume, Kim. A brand new building, hundreds of new Hyundais, and Pohanka's low payment and easy credit programs are designed to get everybody driving. But you have to get here today. Rush to the giant Markdown Madness sale at exit 13 off the Capitol Beltway.
Pohanka Hyundai, king of the Beltway. All financing for a limited term on approved HMF credit.
My baby drives a pro handcuff.
Hello to all my friends in the DMV. I am Rock Newman from the Rock Newman Show. I want to tell you about the MGM Grand National Harbor, the most exciting project to come to the District, Maryland, or Virginia in quite some time. You're going to have great fun. Come on down, support this project with all you have. It is going to be wonderful for the area. We're going to increase our tax base. We're going to get funding for the police department, for ambulance, for fire, for education. It is really a project that is going to benefit our area. Folks, we want to support in a very strong DMV kind of way this great project from the MGM Grand National Harbor.
Hey, this is Leprechaun Tim Pohanka from Pohanka Nissan and Pohanka Hyundai. It's hard to be down on your luck when you're Virginia's first choice for new Nissan and Hyundais, but I need to sell 60 cars this week. Right now, I'll pay you big bucks for your good luck. Bring down any good luck charm you've gotten based on the sale price of the car you choose. I'll give you up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car this week. Today, your lucky penny is worth plenty, up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car you want. Stop moping and hoping you'll get approved. With my For the People credit approval process, the banks are looking to get lucky and lend to you, even if you've been turned down before. Bring me any good luck charm and I'll give you up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car today. Hurry, once I get rid of 60 cars, the luck runs out. All offers require bank approval, so call us at 1-800-POHANKA, visit Pohanka Nissan and Pohanka Hyundai on Route 1 in Fredericksburg, or better yet, log on to timpohankaforthepeople.com. And when we make a deal, I promise it'll be your lucky day. I'm Tim Pohanka, and I'm a leprechaun for the people.
And now, the Rock Newman Show.
Welcome back, folks. This is the Rock Newman Show. I am Rock Newman. We're broadcasting live from Busboys and Poets in the Langston Hughes Room. And I just say it again and again and again. Every time I say we're broadcasting live from the Langston Hughes Room, I just feel real good about that. I want to tip my hat to the visionary who established this business. He is a gentleman by the name of Andy Shalal. He refers to himself first as an artist, second as a social activist, and as something else, and it's a businessman fourth. And he has created an environment here that invites one and all to come and to feel comfortable for racial and cultural exchange and upliftment. I just am extraordinarily impressed about this particular establishment. I welcome one and all to come down. You will find just a beautiful experience here at Busboys and Poets, and of course we invite you. We normally broadcast the Rock Newman Show on Saturday mornings from 9 to noon, but today we wanted to do a special broadcast where we could recap and help celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Martin Luther King, the historic March on Washington that actually took place on August the 28th, 1963. There will be another march and rally and where the president will speak on a Wednesday. It is Wednesday, or August the 28th. My guest this hour is someone that I've had just so much admiration and appreciation for a very long time. I became first aware of her as she was the steward of my alma mater, Howard University, for a very, just a great run. Dr. Joyce Ladner, welcome to the Rock Newman Show.
Thank you.
Thank you
Rock.
for coming.
Glad to be here.
You know, one of the things I'd like to do, maybe the live audience might not be able to see it. Hopefully the cameraman will be able to see it. Right here is a reserve section, Wednesday, August the 28th, 1963, March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. She kept that all that time. Congratulations.
And in good condition, too.
And in very good condition. Well, then, let's start there. Let's start on that day. Tell us how it felt being out there amongst something that was truly historic, transformative, and has become the thing of legends.
Okay, I was 19 years old. I had spent the summer working in New York on Bayard Rustin's staff to organize the march.
Now, you know we're going to want to talk about Bayard Rustin.
Yeah, Bayard. He called himself Bayard.
Bayard Rustin, one of my heroes, and truly one of the unsung heroes.
Right.
He was acknowledged today, and President Obama is giving him, you know, the highest honor. But I do want to talk about all of that. But I'm sorry. So you were on his staff.
I was on his staff. There were about a dozen of us, young people, who worked with Bayard that summer. The way I got to be on the staff was that SNCC, well, all the civil rights organizations were asked by Bayard and A. Philip Randolph to send two of their members to New York to staff the March on Washington. So Cortland Cox and I were assigned by SNCC to go to New York to work. And
now, you were with SNCC. You were in school here at the time?
No. I am from Mississippi. I was a student at Tougaloo College.
Okay.
At the time, Tougaloo is now called the Civil Rights College because it was the center of activity in Mississippi.
Sure.
Now, going back to how I felt that day, my job had been on the march had been to raise money and to recruit black people in the Deep South to bring them to the march. And because I had been very, very active in the movement in Mississippi, going back actually to high school, I was able to go out and crisscross Manhattan and all the boroughs over to New Jersey and raise money to bring to charter buses. And every time I went out, Rochelle Horowitz, who was in charge of transportation, said, "Joyce, you brought enough money back to charter another bus." And that was a really good feeling. I wish I knew how much money it cost back then, you know, to charter. Maybe I'll try to reach it. But anyway, we came down the day to D.C. to the Statler Hilton Hotel on 16th Street the day before the march. Early that next morning, about 6 o'clock, we SNCC people went out to the Justice Department to picket because we had 3 civil rights workers in jail in Southwest Georgia for treason. That was the charge. And all they were trying to do was to register voters. So after that, I went over.
So just so folks understand.
Right.
1963, you had 3 civil rights workers whose responsibility was to register people to vote.
Right.
And they had been put in jail, charged with treason.
Treason. And sedition.
Yeah.
We could not get any attention brought to that case. We couldn't get the Justice Department to investigate. So being true SNCC workers, we went out at 6 o'clock that morning before the march and picketed the Justice Department. Afterwards, I walked over to the mall, got there around 7:30, and was just very, very anxious that people would show. Bayard was there, some other staff people were there. We were all wondering. We didn't have social media and modern means of communication, so we didn't know who was coming.
Sure.
People said they were, but within, I guess, around 9 o'clock, he began to see people drifting in, even earlier, around 8 o'clock, small groups, first individuals, then small groups. About 9 o'clock, just large groups. And as those buses, 200 buses, began to come into D.C. and park, and large groups of people started coming on to the mall with their banners. Then, it just got swelled and swelled and swelled. It was actually an extraordinary day for all of us. And I think the thing that impressed me, there were several things. One is to never have been able to see that many people before. I dare say that no one on that podium had ever seen 250,000 people. So I was able to go on the podium, to go everywhere with this badge.
Yeah.
So that was one thing. And we had 2 stages. There were 2 programs. The first one, after people marched to the mall, the first program was at the monument. And at a stage there, Ozzie Davis and Ruby Dee were the MCs. We had a lot of people speak. We had a lot of singing. The SNCC Freedom Singers sang. Peter, Paul, and Mary, Joan Baez, Bobby Dylan, who was our friend. We knew them. In fact, Bobby used to hang out at our apartment at night, and I just wanted him to go home so I could go to sleep on the sofa he was sitting on. He was sitting there trying to court my sister.
This was 1963. He had a little jungle fever going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he sure did. But what happened is that we had a program, on the on the Washington Monument.
Mm-hmm.
There was a stage there. And it was a warm-up program for the main event.
Sure.
After the main event, there was a lot of confusion now. People say that the only woman who spoke at the march was Josephine Baker. That was another exotic and exciting thing for me to see.
Yeah.
I'd heard about Josephine Baker as this artist and dancer.
Right.
And here she was, decked out in her French Legion uniform, with all her medals, because she had been a courier during the war.
Yes.
Akin to a spy, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess she had written the speech, and she must have told Ozzie Davis that she wanted to give it, so they turned the podium over to her, and she read a long speech. Mm-hmm. You can find it on YouTube, actually. She spoke for about 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Fred Shuttlesworth spoke. A number of people, who were not on the main program.
Was she the only woman that spoke that day?
No. On the official program, after this program was over, the warm-up was over, we marched over to the Lincoln Memorial. And for the official program, women civil rights freedom fighters were honored. Among those were Myrlie Evers, who was the scheduled speaker for the other women.
Right.
She didn't show, so Daisy Bates of the Little Rock Nine gave a rousing speech. You can find it on YouTube as well. Mm-hmm. Gloria Richardson from the Cambridge, Maryland movement was there. Lena Horne was there, but she was not one of the freedom fighters.
Now, Myrlie Evers didn't show, you say?
No, she didn't come.
Her husband?
He had died. He had been murdered on June 10th.
Yeah, just a month or so before.
So one can understand why she didn't come.
Sure.
So Gloria Richardson, Daisy Bates, Diane Nash was invited. Her name is on the program that you'll see on the internet.
Sure.
She didn't come either.
Mm-hmm.
There was one other. Mrs. Lee from Mississippi, whose husband, Lee, had been murdered as well by a state legislator on the courthouse grounds in Liberty, Mississippi, because he had the nerve to try to register voters and register himself. Yeah. So she was an invited guest as well. But this is where, on this program, Marian Anderson was to open it with a song. She was caught in traffic, and someone else filled in for her. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
And John, the controversy of the day really was about the speech that John Lewis, who was chairman of SNCC, had scheduled to give. John had come up to New York and hung out with us for about a week before the march, passed the speech around, and we all looked at it and made comments on it.
Sure.
And it was a collective statement by SNCC, how we felt about what the status of civil rights in the South. And the night before the march, Cortland Cox saw, out in the lobby, saw a stack of Whitney Young, head of the Urban League's speech.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, this is great. I think I'll go and get John's speech copied.
Right.
And he put it there, too, thinking this is...
Sure, a good thing to do.
Right.
Right.
And little did he know that immediately got the speech. Someone informed Archbishop O'Boyle of Washington as to what was in it. And he called Burke Marshall, Civil Rights Division head at the White House, or Justice Department rather, and complained. Then Burke Marshall informed Kennedy and others and made a call to Bayard Rustin and to A. Philip Randolph. Complained.
What was in the speech that they were complaining about?
Well, John said...
Y'all getting some history here on the Rock Newman Show.
The first thing John said was that the Civil Rights Bill that was before the Congress was too little, too late. He said that if we do not get our freedom and do not get it now, we will have no choice but to march through the South the way General Sherman did, scorching everything in our wake.
Who?
Yeah, I thought it was a great speech. We all did.
John Lewis.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
And so they we said he also said we want our freedom. We want it now. And the Archbishop, said that all things in good measure come when the Lord wants them to. So we got irate. We were absolutely pissed off.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when the other civil rights leaders, like Whitney Young and Roy Wilkins of the NAACP, the moderate people, they started complaining and said that they wouldn't speak if John didn't tone it down. And we said, among our SNCC workers, we said, fine, we don't care if they speak or not.
Uh-huh. Y'all was radical. Y'all was some troublemakers, wasn't you?
We were called the Green Beret and the shock troops of the civil rights movement. And I think we lived up to the bill because we went into areas that were the toughest before anyone else would dare go in to try to organize people.
Right.
If you look at Selma, if you look at Albany, Georgia, SNCC workers were in there a long time before Martin Luther King ever came to those places.
Mm-hmm.
And so we really felt that an archbishop had no authority, whatever, to tell us how we felt and were to feel, given the fact that he had never walked in our shoes, had never been in the South working with people, and endured the conditions that the local people endured. In the end, John finally demurred and changed, for example, to march through the South like Sherman did. He put the word nonviolently at the end of the sentence. The tone of the speech remained very much the same. But, a lot of damage was done because, they didn't have a right to beat up on us like that.
Right.
And we always pushed back. I mean, we didn't trust anybody over 30 anyway.
Yeah, sure. So let me ask you, first of all, you said a few things that are fascinating, that, you were in New York and going over to New Jersey and that sort of thing, and you were a Mississippi girl.
Yep.
Now, where did you get it that at that early age you were out doing things, and the things that you were doing could cause you to get shot and killed on a moment's notice? Did you realize it while you were doing it and did it anyhow, or were you just oblivious to the threat?
Well, you weren't oblivious ever because danger was real. I mean, you see friends shot. Jimmy Travis, one of my friends, was shot in the neck. I mean,
did he survive?
Yeah, fortunately he did, and lived a long life. You were always afraid. We were young, and we weren't stupid, though. We didn't take unnecessary chances. But, I mean, just to be out there was a great chance. I got the courage, I think. I learned early on that courage was the ability to act in spite of fear.
Yeah.
I remember Bob Moses, we had this conversation once, and he said that he made the decision very early on that he was not going to be immobilized by his fear, and that he understood that you either deal with your fear of death and then move on, or you don't. And I think all of us dealt with it and moved on. I mean, you never... And we also had strength in numbers. We relied on each other.
We need to hear these stories. I, frankly speaking, am troubled. I am troubled by the lack of connection that our 16-year-olds and 26-year-olds and 36-year-olds have with what you went through, with you and other folks who faced death daily. so that we could enjoy, so that they could enjoy some of the fruits of labor that you put forth. And I don't know what it is going to be. And as I sit here and talk about it now, whatever voice we have here, however much reach we have here, part of what I want to do is to play a role in connecting the absolute courage and valor and commitment that you and your generation had, the efforts that you all took to create a freedom that was so long overdue, and to make sure that generations now and generations that are coming up understand it just simply should never be forgotten. You all are owed a great debt of gratitude.
But, it bothers us, too. We're very troubled, and I say we because we're closer than family. If you go through that, it's like being in a war.
Yeah.
You come out very, very close because you bond at the level of potentially dying. It bothers us a great deal that people like Jay-Z would say that his presence alone is a contribution and it's back and forth with Harry Belafonte.
Yeah.
It bothers me terribly that a little Wayne would use Emmett Till's death in a song in the most derogatory way possible.
Mm-hmm.
It bothers me that young people don't get it. I don't blame them entirely, but I don't let them off the hook either. Because you have each generation, as Frantz Fanon once said, to paraphrase him, each generation must define its mission and fulfill it or betray it. I think there are a lot of young people out here who are doing wonderful things, great things. And they don't have the conditions we lived under of life and death. So I don't expect the same thing from them. In fact, I think they have to decide how they're going to fight the struggle. But we decided, I call ours the Emmett Till generation, because, to a person, everybody I know in SNCC saw the picture of Emmett Till's grotesque body after he'd been bloated on the cover of Jet magazine, and we vowed then that we one day avenge his death. I know I surely did. Didn't know how. I was terrified that it might happen to me, to my brothers. But the story on this is Mrs. Till, Emmett's mother, said that she told the funeral director that she did not want them to do any cosmetic enhancements to her child's body, his face, because she wanted the world to see what they had done to him.
Right.
And you can imagine after several days in a river, they pulled him out, they gouged out his eyes, they shot him in the head, and looked like a monster.
Yeah.
And that was what was on Jet magazine when I was 12 years old, on their cover. And that's why I call ours the Emmett Till generation, because if there was a symbol of all that was wrong, just like Trayvon Martin is for this generation.
Yeah.
And I hope it stimulates them like it did us.
We talked with Janetta Cole about
my dear sister out there.
Her incredible love for jazz. I talked to Mark Morial about New Orleans and the Neville brothers, and you talking about Emmett Till makes me think about a song that Billie Holiday did. It's perhaps one of the most haunting songs ever performed, and she did it, and I loved it, and I loved Nina Simone's version of Strange Fruit.
Right.
Can you talk about that?
Yes, I mean, it is haunting, with, especially with Billie Holiday's rendition of it. But I grew up under the shadow of lynching with not only Emmett Till, but there was another man lynched. Mac Charles Parker was lynched in Poplarville, Mississippi in 1959. Just now it would be only 15 minutes from where I live with the highways and so on. And so lynching was potentially what could happen to your father, to your brother, to your uncles, your grandfather. And I can't describe how powerless I felt as a child when these things happened. But I know that somewhere deep inside me, perhaps because of my mother's courage and standing up for what she believed in, and her family did the same thing, one day, we just said we were going to get rid of these lynchings, or we were going to fight against it. I had an uncle, a great uncle, who was in World War I, Uncle Archie. And he lamented the fact that when he was in France, that some of the French people would ask him to let them see his tail, as in his monkey tail. And he said that I went abroad to fight for democracy, and that's the way I was treated. And he used to tell us that you children have to be the Jackie Robinson of your generation. And he sat us on the back porch, and we listened to the radio of the Brooklyn Dodgers games with him. That was never lost on me.
Yeah.
They expected us to be the generation to change things.
You know, when I was 10 years old, I had one of my first very serious brushes with racism. It was often not known if I was black or white, but the guy one of the neighbors obviously knew. He'd been living around my family and I for many years, and I went up, and the first time, there was the first riding lawnmower I ever saw. And, being a little knucklehead, curious dude that I was, I ran over and said, well, what's this thing? He said, it's a riding lawnmower, and it had a muffler on it. And the muffler was white. It looked like, and it was dripping. And so it looked like the old freezer you used to have. You know how the frost would build up around the freezer? So I went and asked the guy, I said, is that hot or cold? He said, it's cold. So I said, oh, really? He said, yeah, touch it. And I grabbed it. And every time I ever tell this story to this day, I feel that searing pain of grabbing that hot muffler.
Sure.
And I wanted to kill him. I vowed to myself, I'm going to kill this man when I grow up. Now, when I was at Howard University as a freshman, I went home one day. I saw the ambulance up at his house, and I was wondering what happened. I talked to my mother later that night.
Did you hope he had been killed?
And she said he died, and I was like, damn, he died before I could take him out. I've grown up. Hopefully, I've grown up some since then. Did you want to take people out?
No, I never did. I dealt with things very differently. I just thought about ways to change things so that they wouldn't exist, so that conditions around me could change. I always had delayed responses to a lot of things too. I guess it was my way of protecting my emotions and psyche.
Yeah.
We didn't want to kill them. We wanted to make their lives irrelevant. We wanted them to be removed as the obstacles and the barriers to our having our own rights.
Are we in a post-racial society?
Oh, God, no. No.
We got a black president.
Hey, right. And that's the unfortunate thing that people, not that we have a black president, of course, but that some very deliberately and calculatedly call this a post-racial society because one black man is now president. Conditions haven't changed that much. Since he's been elected, and I don't want to get into what he should have done, but no, we don't live in a post-racial society. Just look at what happened to Trayvon Martin, and happened to all the other thousands of men who are profiled, and the people who still live, children who are about to cut off food stamps and cutbacks in Head Start, and just people who are unemployed and denied opportunities, and on and on. And most of all the men who are put in jail every year. Just think of how productive they'd be as fathers and husbands and block captains and deacons in their churches and PTA presidents and so on if they weren't in jail.
We're expecting Dr. Cornel West to come at some point here this evening, and I remember often, and I quote him.
It's not one of my favorite people.
Okay, and he's been getting a lot of criticism, and we want to hear his voice.
Well, I think you should.
Yeah,
and I know him. Him.
The one, but he said something. He said he remains a prisoner. I heard him say years ago, you remain a prisoner of hope. So I think we do all have to remain a prisoner of hope.
Sure.
Are you hopeful for the future?
Yes, because I think this generation will find its voice and will begin to change things. If I didn't have hope, I would be in despair, and I will not allow myself to be in despair.
What I need to do is, I think they might have been telling me we need to go to a commercial break, but I needed to hold that up because you make a statement, and you certainly didn't bite your tongue.
No.
Cornel West is not one of my favorite people. He's been a lightning rod as of late, especially since Barack Obama has been in office.
And I've known Cornel for a long time.
Would you elaborate as to why he's not one of your favorite people?
Sure, because I think that he and Tavis Smiley have made a cottage industry of attacking President Obama. It seems that there's nothing President Obama has done right for them. And I think they came out of the gate as soon as he was elected doing that. I once read that a statement of Cornell's attributed to him when he said that even the bell captain who carried his baggage when he came here for the inauguration had a ticket to the inauguration and he didn't. And I would hope that that wouldn't have been a major motivation for the way he turned on President Obama. There was a lot to criticize against the president, but he and Tavis Smiley never gave the man a chance.
Okay, and we will be talking to him about that, assuming that he makes it here, as has been committed. This is the Rock Newman Show. Today is the 24th of August. We're celebrating and commemorating the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King's historic March on Washington. My guest here in studio, a courageous woman, lived through just times of killings and lynchings in Mississippi, and just matter-of-factly kept on doing the work that needed to be done to help change America and help change the world. Dr. Joyce Ladner. Dr. Ladner, your time at Howard University.
I'm glad to talk about that.
My alma mater, a place that I truly love.
I do too.
Tell us about your time there. Give me your highs and lows. And
I've never been asked to talk about it publicly before.
Oh, well, you got to do it here on the Rock Newman Show.
I'm happy to do so. I first went to Howard in 1971 as an associate professor of sociology. I stayed only 2 years because I got married and moved away. But I came back in 1981.
Can I tell you a secret?
Sure.
I went to Howard in 1970 as a freshman.
Yeah, I remember seeing you walking around the campus.
That's right. And I remember seeing you.
Yeah.
And I didn't have enough game to tell you what I wanted to tell you. I've been asking her for a long time to come on my show. And part of what I wanted to confess up in here is I had a major crush on you.
You know, a lot of you young guys did.
Yes, we did.
There was one.
And look here, and I'm about to tell you something. We had good reason to have a crush on her.
I had a big afro that
yes, you did.
Stood 6 inches tall.
Lord have mercy.
But, you know,
I wanted to hold that. I just wanted to hold that. That's 42 years ago, and I just...
You want to touch it now?
Oh, please let me just... Yes, Lord.
Oh, this is so funny. It's funny because, you know...
There is a guy.
I was only 27 when I went to Howard.
Uh-huh.
And so there was not that big a gap.
No, there wasn't. And it wasn't just your afro we was all looking at either.
Oh, really?
I want to tell you now.
Oh, really?
Okay.
What were y'all looking at?
Padow and padow.
When I was young, but that was my first teaching job. I spent a year teaching young college students in East St. Louis, Illinois, in an alternative program there with Catherine Dunham. Mm-hmm. Then I went to the King Center, the Institute of the Black World, where I spent a year. And I was just traveling. I was just curious about doing a lot of things. Then I went to Tanzania, to the University of Dar es Salaam on a postdoctorate. And I had a good friend, Andy Billingsley, who said, Joyce, when are you going to settle down and start your real career? And I said, okay, I didn't have a job. And he said, you want to come to Howard? I said, fine, why not? Yeah. I was living life on the edge anyway, you know.
Yeah. Damn, I wish I'd known that.
Not your kind of edge. I had a number of young male students in my classes, and one of them, Billy Martin, very esteemed lawyer now.
Yes.
Used to come to my office.
Represented Monica Lewinsky.
Yeah, a lot of people.
And a whole bunch of other folks.
Billy used to come to my office and say, when are you going to go out with me? And I said, I don't date students. Yeah. And I didn't. And I stuck to that. And I wrote a letter of reference for him to get into law school, University of Cincinnati. He's done very well.
I'm just so happy I had an opportunity to express myself here today.
What's your wife going to say if she...
Well, I mean, she wasn't my wife then.
Oh, this is so funny.
We must take a break. We're forced to take a break here. We're having a whole bunch of fun on the Rock Newman Show. Yeah. Hope you are too. Yeah. See you when you come back in a few moments.
All right.
Hello to all my friends in the DMV. I am Rock Newman from The Rock Newman Show. I want to tell you about the MGM Grand National Harbor, the most exciting project to come to the District, Maryland, or Virginia in quite some time. You're going to have great fun. Come on down, support this project with all you have. It is going to be wonderful for the area. We're going to increase our tax base. We're going to get funding for the police department, for ambulance, for fire, for education. It is really a project that is going to benefit our area. Folks, we want to support in a very strong DMV kind of way this great project from the MGM Grand National Harbor.
Stop at the drugstore.
And now, The Rock Newman Show.
Everybody was.
Welcome back, folks, to The Rock Newman Show. We're broadcasting live from the Langston Hughes Room at Busboys and Poets. Dr. Joyce Ladner is in studio with us, and we've been joined for this segment by William P. Jones. He is the author of The March on Washington. William P. Jones, welcome to the Rock Newman Show. Please excuse the reach over.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's good to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us. The March on Washington. Why did you do it, and what did you want to tell?
Well, I was doing research actually in another book, and I found a collection of papers related to the Negro American Labor Council, which is the organization that initiated and did much of the early organizing of the March on Washington. In 1963, A. Philip Randolph was the president of the Negro American Labor Council, and it's an organization that is virtually left out of the history of the civil rights movement. It's barely mentioned. If it is, it's often dismissed as a paper organization. And I found I found these papers related to it, and I thought, here's an event that everybody knows about, but a really central aspect of its history we've never really heard about. So I wanted to write that history.
You know, I want to come back to something Joyce mentioned, working with SNCC and a couple of from each area. SNCC volunteers went up to New York to work with Bayard Rustin. Bayard, he said he's Bayard. He referred to himself as Bayard Rustin. Right. And one of the real untold stories is the incredible. This man, I would say, was the backbone of that march.
Right.
That's
and
right.
Fully unacknowledged, mostly unacknowledged. Joyce, you were on the scene at that time. Are you at all aware of the things that were said? Was like, man, he's a hell of an organizer, and he's putting this all together, but we can't in any way put him out front. Are you familiar with any of the dynamics and the politics that were going on at that time?
Yeah, I was, because what had happened is that the leaders of the major civil rights organizations were very, except for John Lewis and James Farmer, were very uneasy about having Bayard be the chief organizer, and that was because he's gay. Some people had called him a communist, even though he flirted with the communist youth organization in the 30s and was not a communist. And that he had an arrest record for what they called a morals charge. I guess some public homosexual activity. It was only after Mr. Randolph said essentially that he would be responsible for him. And they didn't dare cross Mr. Randolph because he was the venerable old man who had been out there long before the other civil rights leaders actually joined. Bayard never lived his life in the closet. He was always out. He didn't know there was a closet. He
was outly, overtly homosexual.
Yeah, he was gay.
Right.
He had a partner. It didn't matter to us. I mean, why would it matter? He didn't bring it into his work make it central to his work or performance or anything else. And he used to entertain us at his house. He had the most wonderful voice, especially when he sang Negro spirituals. You can find those on YouTube as well. He had this great African art collection of masks and walking canes. And he was just he was a Renaissance man. I mean, I'd never met anybody like him. But what I appreciated most was that we had these staff meetings every day at the end of our work, usually at night. And he valued what I said as much as he did anyone else's on the staff, even though I was the youngest. He was very generous. To work for Bayard was to work for a masterful teacher. He had this great ability to conceptualize the big picture of what this march was going to end up being. But then, bit by bit, he could conceive of all the intricate parts that had to come together. And it was like synchronicity, like a ballet dancer on stage. I mean, it was fantastic.
Masterful.
I learned a lot from him.
Does your book address any of that?
Very much. I mean, it shows Rustin's really central role in building what was the March on Washington movement in 1942 that A. Philip Randolph helped to build, and really the experience that the relationship that A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin had that led A. Philip Randolph to identify him as the person who should build this march and be the director of the march. And his initial plan was, he said, the director of the march should be Bayard Rustin. And because of the objections, A. Philip Randolph said, well, I'll be the director of the march, but he will be my associate director, and essentially turned everything all over and the day-to-day operations.
I'm curious about something. A. Philip Randolph was the organizer. He was the backbone of this march, and he was not allowed to take a bow. He didn't speak.
Yes, he did.
He did.
Bayard spoke. Okay.
Oh,
No, he
Rustin. Are you talking about Rustin or Randolph?
No. No, I'm talking about,
Bayard.
yes.
No, Bayard read the list of, what was it called?
The demands.
The demands at the very end.
Yeah.
The guys, the men who, the leaders of the major civil rights organizations, were very involved in exactly what was going to be on the program. I don't think Bayard expected to have a speaking role as an organizer. I mean, organizers generally recede into the background. I don't remember there having been any discussion, and certainly not on his part, or concern on his part, that he'd be out front. I mean, he was the one who was putting all the pieces together, even that day. I mean, you could see him in the films moving around on stage, still being the organizer.
Yeah.
I don't think that he saw that as his role.
But still, there was a concerted effort not to highlight what was his significant role.
No, I would say it in a different way. I think that once Mr. Randolph said, Bayard, I will be responsible for what happens with Bayard. All the other guys backed off. Bayard, no one else could have put that march together except him. And they understood that. They understood their own limitations. What was the Bayard once said that Martin couldn't organize himself out of not a brown paper bag, something like that. Yeah. But each person had their own strengths.
Okay.
Yeah. King was not an organizer.
And there is, I think it's important to remember that there was significant attention to Bayard Rustin at the time. I mean, he's been forgotten, but he wasn't completely left out. I mean, Life magazine, for example, the cover was a picture of Bayard Rustin and A. Philip Randolph, and the headline was "The Leaders."
Yeah, something regarding 2013, and frankly speaking, I'd like you all to pay attention because it's just something that is somewhat perplexing to me. All the leading civil rights organizations were pulled together in Washington, D.C. to commemorate the 50th anniversary of this Martin Luther King's speech. Religious leaders from all over the country were here today. They, all organizations were represented. Someone on October the 16th, 1995, made a call for a Million Man March. His name was Louis Farrakhan. And more than 1 million people showed up. And he was not invited to participate in the march. And as we talk about Bayard Rustin, that to me is sort of an elephant that is in the room that I think would make for some interesting conversation.
Well, I think an interesting conversation here today is that Malcolm X came to Washington and was at, he didn't go out on the mall for the march in 1963, but right after the march was over, my sister and I walked back to the Statler Hilton at 16th and K, and who is in the lobby except Malcolm? And he's expounding on what he called the farce on Washington. And all these reporters were gathered around. We stopped and listened to him for a while. A number of other people did too, but he was there. And a lot of Muslim people came to the march as well. A lot of nation people came and brought their families. It's an unacknowledged part of what happened, but it was funny to see Malcolm. I described him as ramrod straight. Just posture was incredible. Copper skin and reddish hair, and he had a dignity about him, a tremendous charisma. I had seen him a lot on 125th Street during the summer. On Saturday mornings on my way to work, he was standing out preaching and so on. But to see him right there, he came to the scene, but he didn't go to the mall. But he still came to have his own presence here.
You know, I just wonder, back to the point about Minister Farrakhan being a religious leader and obviously a significant force in the African American community, what it is why it would be that he would not be invited. Is that something that you think that the organizers are uncomfortable to talk about?
I really don't know. I would imagine that if he had come, he probably would have taken it over because of his charisma. I don't know. Yeah. Is that what Cora said was all right? He has a presence about him. I don't know why they didn't invite him, but I think he certainly, had he come and spoken, there would have been a lot of people who responded to him for sure.
Mm-hmm. There's a picture in my book actually of a rally in Harlem in 1962, just a year before the march, and it's a picture of Malcolm X speaking, and it's a rally organized by A. Philip Randolph and Anna Hedgeman, who were the principal organizers. You must have worked very closely with Anna.
Exactly.
Hedgeman. And what's interesting is that I think that the principal reason that he was not involved in the march was that because of the prescription within the Nation of Islam of not being directly involved in politics, and Elijah Muhammad actually very clearly said that they should not be involved in this because of that position, not a sort of ideological difference with the march, but that they just avoided politics. And he changed very rapidly in the year following the march, becoming more, and left the Nation of Islam largely over wanting to be more directly involved in politics. So I don't think it was so much a sort of a difference of opinion initially. I think he really he was very critical after the march.
But those people who were the big six leaders of the major civil rights organizations, Roy Wilkins, A. Philip Randolph, John Lewis, Martin King, James Farmer, who was in jail in Plaquemine Mountain Parish, Louisiana, when the march took place. And he didn't bail himself out. He stayed there, jail and no bail. And Floyd McKissick, his deputy, spoke instead. That was a group of people who believed in racial integration. They would never have invited Malcolm to speak on that program.
At that time?
No.
Yeah. I think the big missing figure in the leadership of that march is Dorothy Height, because she worked very closely in organizing the march. She shared the political positions of all the organizers. Anna Hedgeman pressured Randolph to invite her to be within the official leadership of the march.
But she was on the administrative committee.
She was on the administrative committee.
She and Anna Arnold Hedgeman were the two women on the administrative committee. She used to come up to the office all the time.
Yeah. Your book talks about the exclusion of women.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a much more important, phenomenon.
And what is your research as you put this book together tell you about why a giant like Dorothy Height was not allowed to have a prominent speaking role?
Well, the reason that was given, and you probably heard these reasons. The reason that was given was that the official organizations, the sponsoring organizations, had lots of women in them, and so women were represented by these male leaders, and that was the official position as to why Dorothy Height could not be on. Yeah.
the sponsoring organizations were all headed by men. So the logic of it, whether one agreed with it or not, was the logic of it was that the leaders of the organizations were speaking. And the additional role of speaker was for Walter Reuther for labor. The AFL-CIO did not join in. And then there were religious organizations. All the major religious people were on the program for invocation or benediction or whatever. Now, one could argue that the National Council of Negro Women should have been a sponsoring organization, because it certainly could have been as much of a civil rights organization as the Urban League, which was not, your mainstream civil rights organization. But I don't recall there being, you see, I think that the era today is that so many people use a 2013 perspective on feminism, etc., and superimpose it on half a century ago. Mm-hmm. People were not, I wasn't that conscious of being a woman activist at all. I wasn't at all, quite frankly. For me, the big, big enemy was racism. Mm-hmm. And you have to try to go back and put yourself in that perspective. Sure. And it bothers me that, one person just said that women were so excluded that there were 2 marches, which is preposterous. That's wrong. That's not even... What happened is that, or that the leaders marched with the media on one street and everybody else on the other. What happened is that when the people started getting off those buses, off the trains, and those 10 planes that were chartered, not 10 trains rather, and 200 buses and I forgot how many planes. What happened is that they immediately started marching toward the mall. And the leaders at the time were up on Capitol Hill meeting with Congress people. When they learned that the people had already stepped off, they got in people put them in cars and drove them to the front of the line. That's what really happened. So all the conjecture about there being some people on one street and some on the other had nothing to do with feminism or the absence thereof. It was other things, and it really bothers me when people try to see some discrimination against women under every single rock back then.
Yeah. Well, I think that's right. I mean, there has been some reporting about 2 marches, and I think that's I see no evidence of it. I do think that there was an important conflict with it. I mean, Anna Hedgeman wrote a very angry letter to A. Philip Randolph saying, we need to have women represented officially in this march. Right. Polly Murray suggested picketing A. Philip Randolph when he spoke at the National Press Club, and a number of women said, no, we cannot allow this to derail this wonderful event. So I think it was actually, there was a serious tension, but it remained largely behind the scenes.
William P. Jones, author of The March on Washington. Where can folks get your book? We've got a few seconds left.
I think you can get it right here. You can get it at any bookstore. Here it is.
Busboys and Poets?
Yep, The March on Washington, Jobs, Freedom, and the Forgotten History of Civil Rights.
Thank you both so much for appearing on the Rock Newman Show. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Coming up next, we'll see who we have in the house. If Reverend Jesse Jackson is due and Dr. Cornel West is due. On the Rock Newman Show, we'll be back in just a moment.